Hey, welcome to the Normal America Show. Host robnoerr. Evening versions. Feels like I was just here, right? I was a mere 5.5 hours ago. Anyways, great to be here. I'm early. I said 8 o'clock. I'm early. How about that? 6 minutes of extra content. Lucky you. Lucky me to get to spend some time with you. So we got a debate coming up. It's supposed to be up here in half an hour. I'm sure it's going to use some platform that I'll monkey with the audio, etc., etc. I think that it's using Discord. So, John Smith, number one, what's happening, my friend? I think that that's probably what it'll use. I guess I should have checked. That would have been prudent, right? Let's see. Yeah. Here now, join any VC in my Discord. Gotcha. All right. Nice. Okay, I'll deal with that later. Sorry about that. I was just getting messages for tonight. It looks like we're going to be using Discord, so I got to monkey with my audio a little. One of the things that happens with me when I'm streaming through Discord is sometimes it's like my audio is less than the people that are debating against me on Discord. So I'll be looking to the audience for sort of confirmation that the audio's all right on that. But anyways, well, that's always me, though. I'm less worried about the debate and more worried about sort of technical issues. I'm always like that. I was always the kind of guy that was worried that, like, my pants were gonna fall down or something like that when I was in a debate. The actual, like, debate, it's like, oh, yeah, I'll wreck that. I'm not worried about that. It'll be some stupid ass, glitch or, problem with technology or with clothing or something. My pen won't work or something while I'm keeping notes, shit like that. That I was always. One time I remember in a debate, I was keeping notes and my hand cramped up real bad, and I had to like wedge my pen in my hand like this. It was not good. It was bad news. Man, I am wicked tired. So the goal is here. There's two things I could be doing. One, I could prep for this debate tonight. Or second, I could grift for money and tell you how my day went in the half hour towards the debate. I wonder which one I'm going to do. Prep so that I don't sound like a total doofus. Or grift for money because money's good even if you are a doofus. I know. I'll go with option number 2. And McGad, by the way, I saw your message there. I promise I'll read it in totality and respond later tonight. I'll have all the time in the world tonight while I'm playing D&D. Our D&D crew, it takes them like 40 minutes to decide what bar of soap to buy at a merchant shop. So trust me, there'll be time. But yeah. I think we'll go with option 2. So thanks, Nate. It'll be a good debate. First, I'll talk a little about my day. So, for those of you that were watching me last night or today, today was my son's first day of preschool, going to the Catholic school that he was at. And he seemed to have a real good time. We had a bit of an emotional episode leaving because one of the things you're supposed to do is take a blanket there. And he really liked his Minecraft blanket. He wanted to take it, but you're supposed to leave it there. Now, we had prepped by purchasing another Minecraft blanket today after we dropped him off. However, he didn't know that. So he was a little upset when he was leaving that he didn't want to leave his blanket. He didn't understand that he's going back to school pretty much every weekday now. So it was a little bit of emotional for him for a moment there, but once we were like, look, here's another blanket, it's all good, then he was happy again. But he's very attached to the Minecraft blanket because his entire bedroom theme is Minecraft. So he has Minecraft pillows and Minecraft sheets and his Minecraft comforter and the Minecraft blanket. So he didn't want to screw up his bedroom, which I think is pretty cool. But yeah, that was the gist of it. So I think he had a fantastic time. His teacher said he did very good. He's excited. He wants to go back tomorrow. So all good. I'm hoping he makes some friends. And yeah, so I'm really proud of my man. To watch him growing up is really an amazing thing. So the then I think Thursday's pizza day. So I think that they buy pizza from this local really awesome pizza place called the Pizza Pub, and he's excited for that. Pizza and chocolate milk sounds like lunch of champions to me. So meanwhile, tonight was our first night of trying to eat a very low carb diet, and my wife made chicken and squash, and it was amazing. I think squash is one of my favorites if it's prepared right. So, yeah, it's good stuff. So that was it. I spent a lot of time with my son, and then some time doing some stuff behind the scenes for the Crucible, and I did zero time preparing for this debate at all. Now, a lot of it I think is going to be a rehash, though, so there's not going to be any excuses. The topic's going to be, I mean, I'll just read it, what it says. This is what I've got for, oh, that's the wrong chat. This is what I've got for the topic. Give me a break. Ukraine, Russia, post Alaska. So I think a lot of it's going to rehash a lot of the thoughts that people have had on Ukraine, Russia. I guess there'll be some specific talks of what exactly happened in Alaska there. I got to be honest, I didn't. I'll get to the super chats here in a second. That made me laugh, though. Unforced ego. I didn't see a lot of the actual speeches itself that Trump was having, which isn't good form. I sort of know some of the sound bites, and I know how the reactions were, etc. But as far as the actual sound bites or whatever, I didn't see a lot of that. So let's get to some super chats already. Man, I don't know why that last super chat didn't add in. Kind of weird, huh? Anyways, Level 4 Lobster says OCD. Ha! Yeah, there was a battle this morning about some people trying to get the dono bar exactly an even number, and other people like Lobster here picking on those OCD freaks by putting uneven numbers of money up. So thanks, Level 4 Lobster. How long, Nate? $10 said, miss this morning's call and enjoy tonight. Go get him. I will. Thank you. Really appreciate it, Nate. The great Zachary Gelpy, $5 says, how was the little guy's first day of school? Tremendous. Absolutely amazing. And then I don't know why this one didn't show up in our goal, but man, what a legend. Unforced ego. $100 says, kick the collar. Is that going to be Wick? Oh man, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. You're always incredibly generous. So thank you for that. But yeah, isn't that weird? Sometimes the super chat goal doesn't pick up. I don't know, but who cares? Money gets sent all the same. What are we going to talk about for a half an hour before we get started here? Well, of course, I'll remind you as we get closer, but we're trying to raise 357. Apparently we're $100. The jerk for $1.01. Let me check something real quick. Oh, there it added. It took a while. It got there. All right. Thank you, guys. I was going to say, I was nothing shady. I'll talk about that in a second. Sparky, great to hear from you too, my friend. The jerk is one of those OCD people that's fighting with Level 4 Lobster. They're sort of the yin and yang of the channel. Yin and yang. Yin and yang. Who the hell's Yan? So quite good that there's this sort of dichotomy going on. Also, I realize I'm directly competing against my employer, Andrew Wilson's live stream tonight. That's okay. We like to offer dual brands of entertainment. I hope everyone enjoys. Ron Quay, $5 says, we totally didn't hit the goal this morning, guys, so we need to make sure it happens tonight. Thank you so much. That's right. This bastard, Austin Hall, who I'm pretty sure, allegedly, this is what I've heard about Austin Hall. This is just allegedly. I heard that he's a fan of Wick. Oh, no. Allegedly. So the goal is we're going to try to reach $357 tonight, but it'll be difficult for me to poke and prod you all. I'll try to get a few jibes in there to go ahead and get the dono in, but that's fine. You guys are incredibly generous. I'm sure it'll work its well out. And then after the debate, by about 10:30, I'm going to be joining EOD for some Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons. Yes, yes. The great Joe Boober. This little pixel art made by our friend Emmett. Look at that shit. By the way, if you would like some pixel art, $10 per picture. Our friend Emmett's selling them. So you can check out his channel, and I'm sure you can message him there. And I'll give you that link in 1 second as my YouTube loads here. And it is right here. Bam! Oh, yeah, I got to put it in there. So there we go. Debate. All right, the debate is Ukraine-Russia war post the Alaska summit. That's all I know about the topic. I assume we could take it wherever we want. This will be moderated by Admiral Gibbs. The panel will be Grid Motorsports, Dylan Burns, Average Debate Enjoyer, Lactoid, myself, and Wick. That's the people on the panel. So I assume Wick and Dylan will massively be against my opinions on this. Grid, maybe somewhere in between. Lactoid will definitely be on my side. Probably even Lactoid's probably more favorable to Russia than me. I don't particularly like Russia at all. I just think we shouldn't intervene. And then Average Debate Enjoyer will probably be close to my position on this. I don't know. Oh, man. Holy shit. Unforced ego. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it. I'm out for today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm looking forward to this debate, money aside. But damn, what a legend. $200 more. Too kind, man. Too kind. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. It says Big Grifton, of course. By the way, I discovered you through Destiny before you said he was glad Corey Competitor got killed. Not enough conservative debaters with good memories in the debate sphere. Keep it up. Thank you. Yes, he did say that. The most troubling, even if you wrote that off as a joke, which is a disgusting joke, but even if you did, the worst part of what Destiny said in the whole spiel was when he talked to his co-host at the time, Pisco, and Pisco asked him point blank if he wanted that bullet to take out Trump. He said he couldn't answer because of terms of service, but the worst thing that could have happened was it not taking him out. That's pretty damning. That's not a joke. He wasn't joking around with his co-host when he said that. And that lets you see where his mind was when he made those jokes about Corey Competitor. He also made some jokes about those kids drowning in Texas as well. He also said that you're effing around and finding out if you get shot and killed at a Trump rally. Speaking of deaths, thank you again, Unforced Ego. It's all right. Spell checking on. It's no problem. Yeah, I mean, more Destiny allegations broke today. I don't have much to say about it. I like his drama at this point. All I'll say is this. I'll briefly explain what the allegation is. I'm not sure if it's true or not. It's being alleged. A lot of those text logs that were released of a sexual nature with a young lady. It turned out that lady allegedly was too young, as in 17. Now, I don't know if she showed Destiny fake ID, if he never asked, if these stories are inaccurate and actually she is older than 17, or at the time. I think she's older than 17 now. I don't give a shit. The whole thing's fucking gross. It's just... the only thing I'll say, I'm not going to jump into this. I just don't give a shit. It's just fucking gross. I will dedicate my victory tonight to Unforced Ego. Yes, that's a great idea. Debate victory, Unforced Ego. I'll tell you a little my strategy later this evening before we get in. But the debate's supposed to start in 20 minutes. I don't know how people live with that much drama. Like, just with Destiny. Thanks so much. Becomes a member as well. Thank you, Unforced Ego. Really appreciate it. Hey, what's up, Emmett? There's Emmett. We're just putting your channel out there. And I'll remind people one more time. There's Emmett's channel. He generously came on and gave us like 2 to 2.5 hours last night on the channel. It was fantastic. A discussion about economics, tariffs, socialism. He made me this pixel art of my D&D character, Joe Boober. Axe and all. And if you would like pixel art for $10 a pop, you can head over to Emmett's channel and let him know. and he would be happy to provide you with that. Um, I don't know how. Yeah, I guess some people. I've known people like this in real life too that just thrive on drama. It's not for me. I mean, just with Destiny alone, there's a potential Grace Thorpe lawsuit, a potential lawsuit with people claiming that he sent videos of them engaged in sexual activity without their consent. All of the drama with his son, basically airing dirty laundry online. You know, you had the drama with it. Did he or didn't he sleep with Lauren Southern? That whole garbage. And now you have allegations that he sent sexually explicit messages. It's even worse than that because apparently he received possible images of someone that would later be underage, found out to be underage. Now, I don't know. All of this may be bullshit. I just saw the allegations online today and I just thought, how could you live with that much drama? I don't get it. I just don't. I mean, I don't know. I'm happily married and I'm happy that I'm just a boring husband and father. That's it. I'm not sexting anyone. Um, there's a lot you could talk about, the specifics of it. I mean, one thing, not to defend Destiny, but people don't want to talk about this. But although it's disgusting that a grown adult would be texting someone that's 17 like that, it's not the same as texting a 13-year-old. It's still not good. If it's illegal, it's illegal. But it is true that it's not as bad. And a 17-year-old, you could be duped into thinking was 18, whereas that's probably not very likely if you're talking about someone a lot younger. But, you know, I guess the only thing I'll say without jumping into it too much is just my advice to people is one, don't be a disgusting person that's reaching out to younger people like that. But secondly, like, always assume that any of your messages that you're releasing or sending to people will eventually be released publicly. And don't, I don't know. I guess it's a prude way. I don't understand the fucking world the way it works today. Like, there are adults that are perfectly legal that sext each other through things like Discord. I don't fucking get it. I think that it's absurd. I don't know why you would do that. All you're doing is opening up yourself to being heartbroken or to being embarrassed by that shit being leaked. But hey, to each their own, I guess. My advice would be to not do that stuff, but whatever. I guess I'm an old fuddy duddy. I don't know. But that's it. I don't want to talk about the Destiny shit anymore. Um, I don't know. That's it. Naughty Germ, thanks so much for the $5. Really appreciate it. Really do. It's me, Corey. Screwed up and changed my name too many times. ah. So, no, I didn't get caught up in the sex scandal. But as far as I've not seen any proof that Destiny did anything. There could be explanations. I don't know. Um, one last thing I'll say about Destiny. Uh, he sort of got some like armor because at this point he's been involved in so many of these scandals. It's like, like it's sort of baked in. I don't know how many people in Destiny, even if everything you hear is true, and it was all admitted, and Destiny came out and was like, yeah, it's true, and I'm not remorseful. Um, I don't know how many of his audience at this point would leave. I think the ones that would have left have left, and the rest would say, oh, well. So I guess in a weird way, if you're embroiled in scandals like this over and over again, I guess that it's less impactful when stuff like this comes about. I don't know. All right. So yeah. Anyways, so I was just reading about a little the debate tonight. I think it'll be a good one. So that's it. That's all I have to say. Now, my strategy. Yeah, sorry. I always forget. Sometimes when I read shit, I'm like, oh. Uh, Average debate enjoyer. One of the things he does is he'll send evidence that he's going to talk about to the chat before, which some people like doing. I personally, I don't care about it. Um, but I was just reading, he sent his file over. I didn't notice before he sent it. So I think he'll probably be a little more on the other side of the issue than me. He'll still be somewhat in this, whatever. It should be fun. I'm looking forward to the discussion. But admittedly, I didn't look up statistics on like what's the polling show at this point in Ukraine. Allegedly, like how's the economic situation looking in Russia? How's it looking in Ukraine? How many deaths have there been on the Russian side? How many deaths on the Ukrainian side? Where is the war stand today? Like as far as the front line, is Russia receding right now, surging forward right now? I didn't do much of that research. That's okay. There is no, the topic is literally Ukraine, Russia, post Alaska. That's it. So I think it's just going to be take it where you want, which is fine. Is Ukraine still in conscription? I believe so. I don't think they stopped. They're sort of running out of manpower, I believe. But anyways, neither here nor there. We'll get to the debate when we get there. So, I sort of have the same take on this probably the last time that I talked to someone like Dylan Burns like a year and a half ago, but fine by me. Yeah, Amagad, look at that. Chat 20 minutes in and only 92% of the goal, especially when you consider that Amagad, the great unforced ego gave 300 of that. I mean, damn. But I'm always happy someone that, used to follow someone else, if they start following me because I've changed their mind. Now, normally I would like for that. I don't want to quote steal people's audience. That's not really my intent. But when it comes to a change, a massive change in sort of political belief or behavior of a streamer, then it's a pleasure to know that people are like, "Hey, I met you through another streamer, and for whatever reason, I don't really follow that other streamer as much now." So, no, I'm humbled that I've at least had a positive effect on some people like that. Yes, bless the like button. Chance of Russia loss, 0. Yeah, I would put it about there as well. That's how I would look at it. So it should be interesting though. I'm looking forward to it, and I do like when people actually have more evidence than me. It helps me. Then I could use this debate process to learn as well, which should be part of the. For me, that's always part of the goal of the debate. I want to get more informed and have better opinions, and be able to buttress my opinions better. Uh, Scott Coleman wants to know what my bra size is. Man, look at that picture of you. Before you comment on someone's chest size, maybe you should use a little facial moisturizer. Botox injection gone wrong, Worf? I'm just kidding. I know a Klingon when I see one. Ron Quay, thanks for the $2. Says, I'm doing my part. Thank you. It's much appreciated. So now is the time where we just wait for all the good stuff to begin. Let me see if I have. There we go. Yeah. I'm going to adjust some settings here on the old Discord. People were telling me the other day that I had it set like really stupid. Yeah, I want my input sensitivity low, I think. I don't want it very high. Echo cancellation, we'll leave it on. Automatic gain control off. Yeah, we'll leave the rest of it on. So, all right. And that'll be that. So we'll be starting in a couple minutes. Lagana says actually Russia can lose. The consequences from drone strikes have already been pretty severe. Well, I don't think that Russia would be capable of losing if the West stopped backing Ukraine. Of course, if the West gives infinite resources and munitions and then eventually bodies to Ukraine, then probably eventually they could bleed out Russia. But is it worth that cost? And do we want boots on the ground? I say no, but I say no for various reasons. So we'll see how it works here in the debate. My strategy, a long time ago, I saw a Lactoid debate this conflict on Tim Pool. And I got to be honest, I was very impressed with Lactoid's factual understanding of the predicate for the war, sort of some of the treaties that are discussed in the 90s, a lot of the situation involving NATO expansion and Russia leading into sort of the 2000s. And I had told him if he ever wanted to do a debate, one of the things I'd like to do, my audience isn't going to like to hear this, and I will fail. I'm going to tell you right now, I like to talk sometimes about what my goals are for the debate. I'm telling you right now, I'm setting a goal tonight that I'm 99.99% sure I'm going to fail. But I'll set it out there because it never happens. It doesn't matter if Andrew Wilson's my partner. It doesn't matter if Destiny's my partner, which has happened at least once on a Rittenhouse debate. It does not matter. I'm probably going to want to dominate the direction of the argumentation on our side of things. And tonight, I'm going to try to not do that. I'm going to try to play second fiddle to Lactoid. I think Lactoid's factual basis for his positions are very similar to mine, at least from what I've heard in the past. And he has a good understanding of the data and the facts behind it. That allows me to jump off that as a starting point and then make my sort of inroads. And as someone who likes to fancy myself sort of a debate tactician, to be able to sort of needle from that starting point. So that's the goal. So we'll see, though. I say that, and 20 minutes in the debate, I'll be like, shut the fuck up, Lactoid. Let me get this. Oh, look at this. I foresee CPAP in your future. And with these insurance rates, oy vey. Well, how could you argue with a man who's clearly Jewish? So. Yeah, the battle, I'll say this. I don't know if this will come up, but the fact that you could scroll through X and you could see footage of people being killed on both sides by drone warfare, it's really disheartening. And the glee that people on either side of this, oh, we're killing those Ukrainians, good. We're killing those Russians. They're like orcs. Damn, it's depressing. I know that it's cheesy and it's not a hot take, but damn, I wish that it could end tomorrow. I really do. It's naive, I get that, but that's what I would really want. Yeah, sure. I think their goals of shit. I think there's no doubt. I think you're just full of shit if you're unwilling to admit that everyone was surprised at the initial resistance that Ukraine put up. I mean, there was a thought, and I'll be honest, I adhered to this, that Russia would steamroll Ukraine early, and it didn't happen. And I think it's definitely taken a toll on Russia far more than they expected. But another new account, $5, says, Rob, I like Lactoid, but he gets pushed around in debates on Wix streams, or it's 5 lefties stuck over and shot him down. You'll second fiddle for him. Oh, see, I'm here to make sure that there's no pushing around. I'll do the pushing around. Don't worry. I don't know that Lactoid debates like I do. But allowing him to set the stage for the facts and then me to use those facts to which proceed forth, I think's fun. So they ain't gonna be pushing me around, I assure you. But I am going to try to be a little more measured, like I've been in the past couple debates, and I'll raise my voice if necessary. But yeah, M-Series, I don't disagree with that. If you're against the establishment in the United States, why wouldn't you be against that same establishment basically having Ukraine as a puppet government? Yep. That's how I feel about it. Do I have a secret word planned for tonight's debate? No, I forgot I used to do that. Not tonight. I'll start to get better at that. We'll get a secret word. I completely forgot. Oh, what's this? I got a message. couple X messages. Nothing important. How can I become a member? Well, Kevin De La Riva. There should be a membership button, but someone might donate some memberships too. Now, where are we? Am I on the right channel here? The give me a break. I like that little pun. Am I fucking up this again? I'm going to be furious. I'm going to be real pissed off if I've screwed up the times. I do this all the time. Let me double check. It says 7:30 p.m. CST. That's Central Time, right? That would mean 8:30 p.m. here, right? I got to start asking, like, what? And when I tell people, like, I'm not very smart, I seriously mean that. I'm a fucking idiot. By the way, we're 1% away from our goal. So, and then I'll yell goal before we get there. Did I get the date right? 8:20. Yes, 8:20. Yeah, all of it's good. All right, I think I'm good. I don't understand why I'm the only person that's ever on time to these things. Anyways, there we got the goal. Let me read the super chats real quick. Man, you guys are unbelievable. Gavin, thanks so much. Gavin Freeman, $10 says, I've seen a video of a Ukrainian who was hit by a drone crawl into a building, leaning on his door and watching another head for him and decide to opt out instead. It's brutal. It's heart-wrenching. JR for $10. Thank you so much, sir. Really appreciate it. And then the jerk comes in with $12. And then Ron Quay also for $2. And both say, go. Thank you guys so much. Man, unbelievable. Don't get me wrong. We'll still get those donations. I'm going to cheat. Everyone watching here right now, don't tell anyone, but I'm going to cheat. We'll just do this. Boop, boop. We made our goal. I'm just cheating now. You guys know we made our goal. But sometimes you provide a little incentive to people. Bam! Oh, man! Oh, look at what happened. Oh, no. We're only 37% of the way to our goal. What happened? Oh, boy. Get those super chats in. Thank you guys so much. You guys are the best. There we go. 37%. Wow. One day I'll beat Jim Bob. I got to start doing cardio. Thank you guys so much. We're at 369. Bang. All right. Let's get this audio worked out. There we go. Now we're good. What's up, Grid? Oh, I'm going to turn, it doesn't matter. I got to turn the goal thing off anyways. You look like a chump when you go on someone's screen or debate and it's up there. So we'll turn it off. Last thing I'll say before we start, I promise I will read all super chats at the end. But I hope you understand. I try to give my opponents, the people involved in the panel, the moderator, my attention. So it's hard for me to read the chat, and it's certainly impossible for me to read the super chat. So please, keep getting the super chats in. I promise I'll read them at the end. But I hope that people understand that. I really do appreciate all the super chats. It's just, you know how it is in the midst of a panel. I hope you know how it is. All right. What's up, everyone? I don't believe it, Gibbs. You like super chats over there, too? I thought I was the only one.
Everybody likes the super chats.
So
YouTube's revenue split is pretty rough, though.
Everybody loves a good super chat.
So who are we missing? Lactoid and Dylan. Anybody want to take a bet on who gets here first?
Good question. Lactoid's usually pretty on time.
Yeah, and Dylan's a lefty, which they have about a 50-50 track record of being here on time. I don't know what it is. It must be that Smithsonian. You remember that Smithsonian thing that said it's white supremacists to be on time and
Mm-mm.
plan for the future?
That's what it is.
Us right wingers, damn.
I don't know. My maids came a whole day early today.
Maids?
The fucking Latinas came a whole day early. I don't
Oh
think
my
that applies to every race. I'll tell you that.
Maids.
Yeah, they were like, she's like,
plural.
yeah, she goes, one of them the other day, she's like, oh, this is a new one, Maria. I was like, hola, Maria. And then like 20 minutes later, she's like, no esposa? I was like, no esposa. ¿Tú necesitas papeles? She's like, oh, sí. I was like, yo necesito esposa, eh? It was pretty.
Listen, what is this gibberish? Don't be speaking some made-up language and violate TOS or something that I'm not.
Well, I tell you what, the one thing about that language is, it's the most conservative language. There's only male and female in that language.
France had that. I took a little French in high school. Like I always wondered what happened with that. Like, because you learned about gendered words. Is that offensive now? I would assume there's some people that say that that's offensive.
Bro, they tried to cancel. They tried to cancel Homegirl for fucking having her dog, named Black in Spanish. They tried to cancel her for it. And she was actually from Mexico City.
No,
It's been offensive since that's why Latinx was supposed to be what it was. Is white people were preaching their white savior complex onto Hispanics, saying you no longer can have a bi-gender language. It has to be multi-gender.
Now listen, I just want to give.
Dylan would be lactoid. So we would have lost.
Lactoid loser.
We'll get here 3 or 4 minutes until we'll start.
Also, I have a new hobby now that I'm a full-time streamer. I got some of these stupid things, so you could do like little wrist exercises while you're streaming. I figure you might as well do something. I mean, let's be honest. All of us basically just sit on our ass, So it's like if you could do something a little, even if it's just something stupid like that. I never want to
nail clipper to just fidget with it, right?
Yeah. I never want to find myself on the wrong end of an olive jar that I can't open or anything. So I'm constantly got to get that wrist strength up,
I'd say that would be the end of my career.
I don't know how anyone
As a
could
man,
live through a scandal like that. For real, that would be it.
I would have some big problems.
I hear you.
I would immediately get on steroids. I'll be honest. I would immediately get on the strongest bull shark testosterone I could find. And the Cracker Barrel logo is terrible. Hold on.
What the fuck is going on here? How many times have I debated with Dylan Burns, and this is the first time he's got a more badass beard than me? What a fucking loser. Is he becoming based, or am I becoming more of a loser? I don't know.
Hey, Grid, I don't trust your cleanly shaven face.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's actually a good point.
Yeah.
If he didn't have the flag behind him, everyone would think he's the lefty.
Clean shavenness.
All right. Well, I think everybody's here, right? Right here. Looks like
What is
everybody's
he
here. All right.
hiding behind that non-beard?
All right. Well, let's kick this shindig off. Hey, we're gonna start on time for once. We're only 2 minutes late. I'm proud of all of us. All right. Welcome to another episode of Give Me a Break. We're here to talk about the tough issues today. We're gonna talk about Ukraine and Russia. I think it's going to be pretty spicy in light of what just happened in the last about 5 days or so. I'll let everybody just give an intro and say their where they find you at the same time. Let's start with Tyler. What do you got?
Average Debate Enjoyer. You can find me now on YouTube. I just moved over there instead. Twitter and at my house generally, or at work if you're really looking for me. So otherwise, are we doing intros to the
Yes.
shit?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for it.
Who would have known that Trump's best foreign advisor would be his wife? Happy wife, happy life, happy world, it seems, because she was the one that was telling him Putin was talking out of both sides of his mouth. He said the story at rallies for 3-4 weeks straight in a couple of speeches. And she grew up in this Soviet aggression era over there and wherever the hell she's from. So she is kind of the foreign advisor that we were all deserved and didn't know we needed until she got Trump into this conflict a little more angry at Russia. Latest meeting in Alaska, doesn't seem too much came out of it besides security guarantee. Trump administration saying they got right to the table and started giving up concessions immediately. Russia saying that's the exact opposite of what happened, but everyone's kind of, saving face. Right now, the stance of the war looks like Russia's trying to keep all the land that they earned. Ukraine's trying to push them back and even take back Crimea. Some of the polling is a little bit split. We'll get into that. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got. I'm just trying to got a bunch of articles ready to dive into this bitch.
That okay, fantastic, Mr. Burns.
What is it? Intro, and is there a question, or are we just like kind of
Yeah.
shooting the shit on the
Yeah,
topic?
yeah, on the topic. Just go ahead. What's your overall thoughts?
Okay. My name's Dylan Burns. I'm Twitch's chief national security risk. So I think that the meeting went. It didn't go as bad as it could go. It didn't go as good as it could go. But I don't think it achieved any of the goals of what it set out to achieve. Trump said in advance that if he left the meeting and he didn't have a ceasefire, he would be disappointed. They left the meeting without a ceasefire. Not only did they leave the meeting without a ceasefire, they left the meeting without even with the idea that they would approach a ceasefire in the future, that they're essentially abandoning the idea of a ceasefire in order to approach now just a permanent peace agreement with no lead up through ceasefire, meaning that this could leave open the possibility of the Russians dragging this along endlessly, while also not really being willing to move anywhere closer physically towards a cessation of hostilities on the battlefield, which is a long way off from the 24-hour ceasefire that we saw at the start of the administration. One thing that I thought could have been good was a Putin-Zelensky meeting. This is something I want. This is something that I think would be good. I think it would be good both to indicate that these two governments can talk, which could possibly move something forward. I think it's low odds, but it's possible. But it's also important to show that the Russians acknowledge the Ukrainians as their natural, they're next to them. They're their neighbor. If you can talk to your neighbor, you acknowledge your neighbor. But so far, even though Trump in the White House and Caroline Leavitt has said that the Russians have agreed to a one-on-one meeting between Zelensky and Putin, the Russian government is indicating something different, with them saying that they actually are much more, they're interested in having a slow escalation of negotiations through higher level diplomats going. So we go from the pencil pusher to the button pusher to the ass scratcher to the doorknob sucker to the window licker. And then eventually you get through the whole bureaucratic circle until you get eventually to that meeting. So we're not any closer to that meeting. And as for the security guarantees that they talked about, that was probably the most promising thing I've heard. But I have yet to hear anything reciprocatory from the Russians to say that they acknowledge that they're going to have to give Ukraine a significant security guarantee, and they keep referring to the root causes of the conflict, which is usually a synonym for the maximalist demands. So I have yet to see anything come from this outside of hopefully some more prisoner exchanges, which is what I think will probably end up being the most substantive part of all of our negotiations with the Russians, which is the only real benefit we've gotten from them so far.
All right, thank you so much. Grid.
Yeah, I'm Grid One Motorsports. You can find me on YouTube and other places if you look. I got to be honest, I'm a little disappointed with the way the meetings went. I was actually really happy that Zelensky showed up in a suit. That was promising. However, I still think that he has almost no interest in ending the war, even less than Putin does, despite his country wanting him to. And so I'm not really encouraged much at all that there will be a ceasefire. I think that overall, Trump is fighting an uphill battle here. I do think that, as Tyler mentioned, I think Trump always understood that Putin would talk out of both sides of his mouth. I think that perhaps he didn't really expect quite as much as he got, which I think he acknowledged to some degree. And I think he is very disappointed in the way that this peace process is going. He's on record as saying that this was far more difficult and involved than he had envisioned going into it. He thought we'd have a deal by now. Obviously, we don't. But we'll see where things lead. And this is going to be a great discussion. I can tell already.
All right, Lactoid.
Lactoid, you can find me at Lactoid TV, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. So my take on all of this, as somebody who follows it pretty closely, I think that it's a good thing that negotiations are happening. I think that Trump was right to meet with Putin. I think Trump was right to meet with Zelensky. I think Trump was right to meet with all the various European leaders who accompanied on that Zelensky meeting. And I think it'd be right for Putin and Zelensky to have a meeting, whether Trump be there or not. I think that when world leaders are talking about peace, that's always going to be a good thing, especially when this war has been so brutal. I think, we did learn. We didn't get a ceasefire, and we actually had a panel, myself and a few of the people here, where we put a relatively high chance that we weren't going to get a ceasefire, and that looks like that kind of happened, unfortunately. But we did learn a few things, and I think one of the things we learned, or a couple things we learned, was that for the first thing, Zelensky should have just worn a T-shirt. That was a woman's suit. It did not look very good on him. Did not look flattering. He should have just come with a T-shirt. Seriously, I don't know why people are bullying him about the suit. It seems like a really weird thing, and the fact that he like sort of compromised and looked awful doing it, very, very poor choice. But on a more serious note, it looks like the security guarantees are sort of being talked about again. It looks like they're nearly identical to the security guarantees that were first proposed back in March of 2022 at the Istanbul Peace Conference, about a month after the 2022 invasion. So, I was surprised to hear that the Russians are still up for that, considering their battlefield victories. But it looks like, that's, I guess, good news, although it's not something that we haven't heard before. I mean, the security guarantees are, from what I can tell, proposed to be substantially similar to what we've already heard before. And yeah, I think that's really the main thing that we learned. And the other, I guess, main thing is that I don't know if Russia's going to get tariffed now. That's not really talked about anymore. So we'll see.
All right, Rob.
Yeah, Rob Noor, Normal America with Rob Noor on YouTube, and just Rob Noor or some form of Normal America on Rumble, X, other platforms like that. I think that the fact that these talks happened was a very good thing. It does a couple of things. First, less important is you could see the people that are livid that Trump would sit down with a hostile world leader or an adversarial world leader like Putin, because it's not that these media people, these Democrats, are worried that Trump will fail in his negotiating tactics. It's that they're worried he will succeed. And they don't want that. That doesn't benefit them and their agenda to go after Trump. And it certainly doesn't benefit many of these people, whether they be neocons or they be sort of neo-libs that embrace that neocon ideology that sees benefit in, like Lindsey Graham said, bleeding Russia out. They'll be happy to see every Ukrainian man die to the last person if it means that it helps them achieve their goals. Unfortunately, the people in the West, in the United States, and in Europe and other places that speak the loudest about the need to defend the Ukrainian people, a large portion of them don't give a shit at all about the Ukrainian people. And I talked to Dylan and many other people years ago. Spoiler alert, this is how it ends. The people with Ukrainian flags in their bio, other than good people like Dylan, that clearly this is an important issue. And I do commend him for actually going on the ground out there. And regardless of our disagreements on this issue, I think that takes a real person with convictions to go out and do something like that. So I pray that he and his friends stay safe and that there's no excess bloodshed. But, that's not going to happen, unfortunately. But nonetheless, I think most of these people in the West, they don't care. They just see what's going on, the conflict in Ukraine, as a stepping stone to further their agenda, whether it be through personal kickbacks and some sort of monies that's being sent, or a geopolitical goal in taking down Russia by bleeding them out. So it's going to end when those people lose interest, and eventually it'll be the Ukrainian people that suffer, and they would have been better off to negotiate or to push for a peaceful negotiation way back in 2022, like in the Istanbul agreements or accords, like Lactoid was talking about, because I think one thing you could say positive about Ukraine is they shocked the world and they shocked Russia at the onset of the initial invasion. That would have been their peak negotiating position. Ever since then, even though Russia is certainly not doing as well as some people would have you believe, Russia's making inroads. And without the West constantly financing, giving munitions and other sorts of help to Ukraine, they could not stay in this fight. And unfortunately, to a lot of people that want Ukraine to come out on top, they're going to be negotiating from a position of weakness. So they're going to end up having to give up stuff. And this is going to infuriate a lot of people that are saying, how could you give something up to this horrible dictator, Vladimir Putin? That's life. That's the history of war. If you're negotiating from a position of strength, you get more of your asks. Russia will have to give up something too. Hopefully it is in the form of security guarantees. But that's how I look at this. It's good that Trump sat down, tried to bring people to the table. That's all good. But I'm going to tell you right now, this is going to sound like a cop-out. I don't know what the hell the results of this was. Like, these things are so fluid. It's like you can have it like, hey, we have this mineral deal. It's all signed and ready to go. And Just like that, it blows up. So we'll have to see what the results of this are. I think that any time that these world leaders are coming and talking about a potential peaceful resolution, that can't be a bad thing. And so I'm hoping that this leads to more progress. It leads to Putin and Zelensky getting into a room, and it leads to hopefully Trump and the people in the West helping facilitate some sort of ceasefire and having some sort of negotiations that leads to this terrible bloodshed ending. The last thing I'll say, just to throw a little jab, is the United States should not be involved in any of these conflicts, except in order to negotiate peaceful deals. We need to stop intervening. Oftentimes we make the conflict worse. I think a lot of the decisions the United States made with westward expansion of NATO and sort of actions that they were taking in places like Ukraine, 2014 and elsewhere, helped give an excuse to Russia. That doesn't mean that I think Russia's justified or good people or anything like that, but oftentimes there are unintended or intended consequences that exacerbate the situation. And fuck Zelensky for what happened to Gonzalo Lira. They're basically our vassal state, and until they answer for jailing someone for the crime of free speech, it's bad enough when our enemies do it, but when our ally that relies on us for their existence does it, and then that person tragically dies, I think they shouldn't get a goddamn dime until they answer for that.
Thank you so much, Wick.
Okay, so a lot to address here. Little rich about jailing people for free speech when Trump's sitting around jailing immigrants for free speech and speaking out against Israel right now. That would be a crazy thing for someone to do, to send someone to jail for writing an op-ed that's anti-Israel. That'd be a terrible, terrible thing, right, Rob? But regardless of that, that's not the topic tonight. Tonight, we're going to be talking about the Alaskan summit and the follow-on summit, or it's not really a summit, but the meeting with the European leaders and Zelensky with Trump. I actually think the meeting with Zelensky and the European leaders, decent. I mean, nothing happened, but that's the best kind of outcome in these things, right? That nothing actually happened. That's kind of the best outcome we could expect with Trump at the wheel here, right? Look at the meeting last time with Zelensky and how terrible it went. I find it amusing that they made JD Vance kind of stay silent during the meeting this time. Good call, actually, and I will praise Trump when he does something correct, like he did there, and just sideline JD Vance for that, so he couldn't interrupt and disrupt again. So that's good. Let's see. When it comes to peace, sure, I hope peace is going to come, but I don't think it's going to. I think Putin is just running around in circles. Oh yeah, sure, we'll get peace. Sure, in a few weeks we'll have another meeting. A few more weeks we'll have another meeting, and he's kind of just leading him along while he does whatever it is he wants. The only way we are going to achieve actual lasting peace is to stop Putin, right? Whether it be in Ukraine, whether it be in Poland, or whether it be in some other area where he next decides to take a little chunk, take a little piece, just the tip. And when he does, obviously, MAGA and the Republicans are saying, yeah, you should just let him have it. Just let the dictator have it. Peace in our time, gang. Peace in our time. Just the Rhineland, right? Just the borderland, just a little. And they'll certainly stop this time. It won't be like all the other times, but we'll see. I hope I'm wrong, frankly. I hope I have egg on my face. And people are like, and Rob and Lactoid and all the others are like, ha ha ha, you were so wrong, Wick. He got it done and everything's good. I hope that's true. I just don't think it will be. That's my thoughts.
All right, thank you so much. Let's just start this off. Let's examine if we think Trump is the guy for the job to solve this. We've seen recently, Pakistan has claimed that Trump helped in the India-Pakistan war. Cambodia nominated him for a peace prize for their truce. Rwanda and the Congo has credited Trump with their peace deal. Some argue that maybe he stopped the war with Iran because we went in there and dropped the big boy bombs. I know that's controversial. I know the Indian one's controversial. Do we think that he is the guy that's going to be able to get this done? Thoughts?
Abraham Accords as well. He got a bunch of people that didn't normalize trade with Israel on board with normalizing trade and free access. So maybe
I want to be generous to Trump here. For example, I think that what he's trying to do with Azerbaijan and Armenia is good. I think it's a good thing. I think it helps American influence in the region. I think that providing a corridor between the Azerbaijanis and the enclave behind Armenian territory is a good thing. But I'm not confident in a lot of these deals that he quickly negotiates that they're exactly stable. Because, for example, just for the Azerbaijani and Armenia example, the Azerbaijanis have been open that they've signed it, but they haven't really. They've signed it, but it isn't really in force until the Armenians change their constitution and come in line with their demands. And so this is something that could stay or it could fall apart. And it's not like the Azerbaijanis and the Armenians haven't been said, hey, we recognize the other's territorial integrity before. The things that are being said at these meetings are nothing new. It doesn't mean it isn't good news. It's just saying that if historical trends continued, it could fall apart just like the rest of them, which is also the case when it comes to Cambodia and Thailand. That's not to say that none of these things could not improve America's image or America couldn't do a good thing. It's to say that in all of these instances, Trump has yet to come in and change the fundamental equation enough to say that he has been the one that shifted pieces into place. The pieces fell into place. Trump saw it like a hawk, came in and grabbed it. That's not the situation in Ukraine. It's going to take a lot more building that Trump has not done.
So I'll say this. Certainly you could say any situation where there's some sort of attempted negotiation that things could fall through or that they won't stay. The question is Trump the man for the job? I guess my question would be, as opposed to who? Biden? The human vegetable?
I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree that he's the only man who can do it. That doesn't mean he will be able to do it.
Well, that's a fair criticism. I can't say with 100% certainty. I think that he's the best chance, not just of currently right now as world leaders, but I also think he's the best chance of the previous or potential picks that we would have had instead of him. I think that Joe Biden, for various reasons, wasn't going to be able, as was evident during his term. And I think that Kamala Harris would have been more of a continuation of that. Look, it's worth saying, regardless of what you think of Donald Trump, and I criticized him, for example, with the bombing of Iran. That is something that I was critical of at the time. And so far, things have came out about as swimmingly as they could as a result of that. Though, mark my words, if there's some terrorist attack that's blamed on Iranians in the next 6 months, people would look at that as a potential reason for blowback, and I don't think they would particularly be wrong. Nonetheless, my feelings on that strike aside, one thing that does is Trump has this lean of he hates war, but he's unpredictable. And he's the definition of walk softly, not in the way he talks, obviously, but softly in that he seems to at least speak out against war, but he has that big stick of being unpredictable. And so he's willing to sit down with someone like Putin. I think that you could see that the Democrats' position, no, we wouldn't have sat down. So what's the potential peaceful negotiation? The same with Zelensky. He's willing to sit down with them, and he's saying, even if you think it's just because he's a selfish SOB who just wants that peace prize, so he can say, see, Obama did it, but I did it better. Even if that's the reason, he's at least willing to sit in the room with these people and try to be this grit, it's sort of arrogant where he wants to be this guy that brings in two people from different sides, just like in the business world, and sit there and be like, well, let's split the baby. Here's what we'll do instead. But at least that gives you a chance at a peaceful resolution. And I didn't see that with Biden.
The problem with this idea, just real quick, the problem with this idea that Trump is unpredictable is I don't think it's true. I think he's extremely predictable, actually. He will do whatever the last person who he trusts that is in the room with him tells him is a good idea. And that will last until someone else comes in the room that he trusts that tells him, oh, no, actually, this is a good idea instead. And that is utterly predictable. You can track what he does based on this metric. Like this idea that he's this unpredictable maverick that you can't really predict ever. It just doesn't bear out.
Okay, Wick, let's test this real quick.
Can we go back to the subject
real quick. Who's going to have his ear a week from now?
Putin.
You're certain of that? Is Putin have his ear right now? Is he listening?
Yes,
to Putin?
Putin has his ear right now.
So your claim is that the last person in the room with Trump right now is Putin. That's who Trump's listening to?
Well, the last person in the room was the European leaders, but that's going to change when he talks to Putin next.
But you just said that Trump's super predictable. Whoever he's paying attention to and who's in the room, that's will decide what he does. So I'm asking you a week from now, who will that person be?
Again, he's supposed to call Putin.
Okay, a week and a half from so he's going to be listening.
So all you're trying to do here is say, well, Wick, you specifically don't know who's going to be in the room with him, and that might be true, but other people do.
So what I'm suggesting to you is two things. One, that you're full of it. That's not as simplistic as you're making it. Literally, the last person in the room is exactly who Trump will adopt the position. That's a joke. And secondly, even if that was true, we don't know who the person that will be in Trump's ear is, which means from the perspective of someone outside, it doesn't matter how you think he comes to his opinions. What those opinions will inevitably be are unpredictable. You don't even know who will have his ear, and so it would be unpredictable.
I'd like to add a couple of things. First, Wick, I that's an amazing claim, but he didn't listen to Elon at all when Elon made his recommendations. He said, Elon, I'm sorry, you're wrong.
He gave him Doge. He let him run Doge. He let him have the run of the field. And it wasn't only until Stephen Miller came in.
Hold on. That's
It wasn't until
I
Stephen
like it
Miller
when you
came in and convinced him
mischaracterize
otherwise.
He didn't let him run Doge. He hired him to run Doge. That's two entirely different things. That
Okay.
was literally his
Okay.
job to do that. Like you're like, well, he just let him run rampant. No, he didn't. He had
He
a job to
hired
do.
him and then let him run it because he hired him to run it. Like, yes, it's the same thing.
Sure,
You just said the
you
same thing I
you
did.
can spin it that way, but that's fine. But
Okay.
even more important, Wick, and actually, I wasn't really aiming at you with this. I think that the biggest and most interesting thing that that Trump's doing a little differently than I think most of the other world leaders would consider right now is this idea of what the security measures are actually going to look like because of the no NATO thing. And how we're going to make that work without it being a burden to the U.S. I don't think he has a clear picture of how he's going to make that work yet, but at least he's aware of that's got to happen for this war to end. I don't think Zelensky's going to walk
We know
away
some
without
things.
those.
We
Sorry?
know some things. We know there's
I know
not
we
going
know
to be U.S.
some
boots on the
things, but
there's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground.
Yeah, it's not going to be U.S. It can't be NATO. It's going to have to be some
again, a
coalition.
lot of these kind of mirror the negotiations that were happening very early on, right? No kind of permanent military presence and form military bases, et cetera. But their guarantees are still on the table. One of the things with Trump specifically is I don't agree with this characterization that he'll just go along with whatever the last person says. That being said, I do think he's movable. I think that he will hear people out and he can be moved on positions and he will be. And so, for example, yes, I think following the Putin meeting, his rhetoric much beforehand was much harsher than it was afterwards. But then going into the European meeting after, he spoke with Zelensky and he's, sitting around the table with Zelensky and all the other European leaders, he is, agreeing with them at parts, but he's couching a lot of his agreement and he's a lot of his rhetoric is like including things like, and yeah, you're going to have to give up some stuff too. And yeah, and I think the reason why he's doing this is because he's sort of very much like was said, viewing himself as this intermediary that's trying to resolve a conflict between what he perceives like Russia and he perceives like Europe, right? Because most of the European leaders there have a very hawkish kind of in line with Ukraine position on this. And then obviously Russia is the opposite position. And so Trump thinks that perhaps by kind of taking a more middle ground kind of intermediary approach, that he can bring the two together.
So before we got down the TDS, Trump just goes out the last thing he heard. The actual administration's policy is lined up specifically for this. So the attack on Iran, what it did was it destabilized trade routes for Russia to bypass sanctions and bypass tariffs by trading through Iran. One of their top buyers of Su-35 fighter jets and S-400 missile defense system was Iran. Iran's no longer buying those things from Russia. It also, the 25% tariff on India and threats to other countries for doing business with Russia as well, like tariffs coming down the pipeline, as the administration warned. If you look at their foreign policy, it's been isolating Russia on the world stage, as well as when Syria got overtaken, a proxy state of Russia. Russia couldn't even throw troops into there. As soon as it got taken over by people that are opposed to the Russian proxies that were in place, Trump backed them and tried to let them into the Abraham Accords. In every way, Russia is being isolated on the world stage. So they say he's just kind of ad hoc coming up with his foreign policy based on the last whisper in his ear. It just so happens that his foreign policy all ended up going in one way. Like Rubio is the one in charge of these.
Tyler, let me just ask you a question here, though. At the same time, Iran, established country, they're at like net, I don't know, let's say they're at 40% of their overall capacity. North Korea, they've been at like, let's just say, I'm just making these numbers up, but they're like 3% of their overall capacity. Now they're out of a famine. Now they're getting that frontline training. Factories reopened. Like, is this not a concern that you've like, oh, we destabilized these two pussies that weren't really doing much, and now we gave an actual animal a real hold in here to the world stage? Like, is that not something you're concerned about?
North Korea, I'm more concerned that Russia would hurt us than North Korea. What Russia's doing right now is they're taking laborers and working them like slaves inside factories. They're putting them on the front lines to die for the Russian cause. Like North Korea, maybe they're getting experience, but they're also losing people and giving up their own labor for their own GDP to build by sending them to Russia as a favor. So I'm not that concerned about that as much. No, North Korea is kind of not that big of a threat.
Are you not concerned about the technology transfers at all, or like the Russian air defense systems opening up on North Korean boats, or any possible future assistance with their longer range ICBM program?
I mean,
Yeah,
no more concerned than I was prior to the war about North Korea. Yes,
Well-
all those concerns already exist.
Well, let me piggyback
He's
off
also
that a
still
little bit.
hold on. Russia's also still selling to Iran. By the
Well,
way.
I also want to
They are
piggyback
really
off that a
smart
little bit.
pals.
Is I know that North Korea's got trade deals with Cuba and Iran should like repair their stuff, their old Soviet tech. They're also, I think, this might be a few years since I checked this, but at one point there was only 6 countries and the European Space Agency were the only countries that ever put satellites into space. North Korea is one of them. Like, you're not worried that now they're going to have Russian tech and like be able to really increase their shit? Like, I don't know that this is not
They've
something.
always had
Iran's never
access.
done that, as far as I know.
China and Russia have always had access. China's been defending North Korea on the world stage for a long time. It was the big thing during the Trump administration where they got China to sign on to stronger sanctions against North Korea. But the same thing on the world stage. Like we look at the economic, Russia's oil revenue year to year dropped, June year over year is at 37% below, or 33.7% below what it was last year. They're losing revenue, and a lot of this has to do with the 2025 output of the United States economy with energy. The 3 exports that have been growing the highest are all energy exports. Trade deals worked out with the EU, completely supplanted all the Russian energy that they were buying with U.S. energy, forcing them out of that market. Now we see 17 and upcoming 18th round of sanctions out of the EU. So like all this driving them out of the energy market, again with tariff threats as well, has been hurting the shit out of their economy, as well as hitting them with a 2-punch of taking out trade routes and allies that are buying things from them. Russia's getting hit on all sides right now.
And let me just say, I'm confused, Gibbs, is even the nature of the question in this sense. Like, okay, Russia bad. We could agree or disagree with that. But it seemed that you brought that up in response to average debate enjoyers saying, look, the attack on Iran was something that helped destabilize a trade partner. And then it's like, yeah, but then they went to North Korea. So we shouldn't go after Iran because that could lead to other partners for China and Russia and then turning to North Korea. Is that the implication here?
I guess the question I'm asking here is, I see North Korea personally. I mean, I know I'm moderated here, but as like a drastic existential threat that's not been remotely realized. They have nukes. They've got the 3rd largest military, or like the 4th largest military, depending on which stat you want to look at. You know, they're in the midst of modernization program. They used to have just old ammo, right? Now they've reopened these factories, sold all the old ammo. They're making good ammo now. They've got more experience in the CCP, like fighting actual wars now. I think that the fact that they're at like 3% or 5% or whatever percentage we like potential right now, and now they're at like 10%. They have such mass gains that they can make that by enabling them, I think that we're really like letting somebody that's unhinged with the North Korea dictatorship like have the power that we're not. And Iran, I do agree, it's good that we've destabilized Iran, because it's not a nuclear power. However, it's like now we've enabled maybe the most dangerous nuclear power. Like I don't know.
I don't understand the direct link, right? Like how Trump and whatever actions he took in Iran are responsible for now North Korea getting a gain in technology and stuff. I don't understand that direct link. I think this is a separate debate topic that doesn't really have to do with like what should the United States do vis-a-vis North Korea. We probably have differences on there. All of us may have differences, but I don't see what the connection is other than very tangentially to the peace summit trying to have a peaceful resolution with Russia and Zelensky.
I would say also that while North Korea is certainly less stable than any other country, probably definitely with nukes, they're more. I mean, I don't see them trading with Russia as that big a deal because they're already trading with China, where they get a lot of their technology, and they steal a lot from South Korea as it is. So, I mean, their leaps and gains in technology, I don't think are going to come from Russia directly at all. If anything, just being able to get food from Russia. If Putin allows it, would really help them and maybe even stabilize the country out, because that's really a big
let me see if
I know this isn't.
I was gonna go ahead, Dylan, because I'm gonna try to steer it back towards.
I wanted to steer it back. The only thing I wanted to say is the thing that concerns me the most is probably work skill transfer. That if you get 25,000 North Koreans and you move them to Russian factories and you have them build shaheeds, some of those workers are going to remember what they did. They're going to come back to North Korea, and then the North Koreans are going to be building their own version, just like they have for Chinese weapons. And I've seen a ton of weird Chinese weapons that the North Koreans made their own domestic versions of that are now being exported to the Russians and are bombing these boys on the front line. So that's probably the thing, the drone experience that North Korea is getting. It's different than a lot of even modern militaries are getting right now.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Lacto, if you wanted. Then I was going to steer it back, but go.
Sure. I'm also, I guess, a little bit. I don't think there's too much of connection between the actual bombing of Iran and that being too related to this conflict here. But I guess to relate it to the point, I do think that China does keep North Korea somewhat on a leash, and they historically have, right? Because they are interested in kind of their own geopolitical relations with the West and their own development. And I think that North Korea obviously has benefited from this conflict because whether you support them or not, the massive amounts of sanctions that have been placed on the Russian economy have pushed them to seek alternatives, right? When you disconnect somebody from their kind of main economic relationship with Europe, they're going to be, a tremendous amount of pressure. They're going to be much more willing to make deals with other geopolitical rivals of the West, and in this case, China and their sort of little ally, North Korea. And this is what we've seen, right? They've made oil deals with China. Kind of interestingly, they trade much more oil with China than they do India. Yet Trump wants to put tariffs on India over the oil thing. I'm not even really convinced it's going to happen, but we'll see. But what I'm interested in is, will that last even after peace? Because I understand that Russia's, obviously sanctions hurt it. I mean, whether the actual effect on its economy is kind of up for debate, but obviously they're not good for an economy. But will the kind of economic realignment that Russia's undergone to now kind of become China's economic partner more so than Europe to a much larger degree, is that going to persist? And if it persists, I think that represents actually a pretty big geopolitical loss for the West and the United States, because now what it means is that this large country, Russia, which with a shit ton of raw minerals and resources, has now oriented its economy towards our largest geopolitical rival, which is China. And that's going to be, I think, very disappointing and a kind of a blowback of a lot of the sanctions that we put on Russia.
I don't disagree. To bring it to the question that Gibbs asked, it seemed that Wick was sort of saying that Trump's foreign policy is sort of ham-fisted, or, I think you're oversimplifying and incorrect. But to ask the question directly to you, Wick, then, given your answer there, a twofold question to you. One, can you imagine anyone else in the world right now, any world leader, that would be in a better position to try to negotiate a peaceful deal other than Putin and Zelensky themselves?
No, I think
Trump?
The U.S. absolutely is kind of the only power right now that could facilitate a deal if one is to be made. Can it facilitate a deal is the question, and I honestly don't think Putin wants peace. And I think that's something that, at the end of the day, if Putin doesn't want to stop the war, he's not going to stop the war. There's really not much we could do aside from simply arming Ukraine and even going further into supporting Ukraine than we have that we could do. However, I don't see Trump doing that. I just don't see Trump going that route.
I'm certainly happy to talk about whether or not negotiations can be successful and which sides to blame and all of that. That's fine. But the other question I want to ask you, just as a quick follow-up, do you think that Biden or Kamala Harris would have been in a better position to negotiate a peace deal than Donald Trump?
I think Kamala would have done a better job. Biden might have done a better job. I'm less certain on that one, but I think Kamala would have been a better person to facilitate.
What did either of them do in their administration?
Hold on. They obviously made sure that Russia knew what side that the U.S. was actually on, and they continued to actually arm Ukraine, actually fund Ukraine, actually support Ukraine. Not as much as they should have.
Right. They kept the war going. We're asking who would be best to have it.
Here's the thing. If Putin does not want peace, well, let me just ask. Just assume I'm correct here, that Putin just does not want peace. So all these peace talks, it's not going to work, right? How do we get peace other than that? Stopping Putin.
If you start under the assumption that nothing in the world will stop Vladimir Putin, then yes, you could say that no one would have been successful. However, that would contradict your claim that Kamala would have been more successful.
No,
because clearly, if we accept your own hypothetical,
you're phrasing this incorrectly, right? There is a way to stop Putin. You make it much more expensive than it has been to continue to prosecute the war. This is how all smaller countries have always beaten bigger countries. They make it
not true.
Insanely costly in order to continue to prosecute the war
question, though.
until they give
when-
up and go home.
When the Biden administration was in power, they told Ukraine that they weren't allowed to use certain missiles, drones, and whatnot for deep attacks into Russia.
Yeah,
and
that was a
didn't-
mistake.
That
That was a
didn't
mistake.
end until the Trump administration's transition team requested it end after the election was already over, allowing Ukraine to engage in these giant drone attacks we've been seeing, where they're actually costing the Russian economy, they're actually costing the Russian military massive amounts of money. I thought they took out like a large amount of their large bombers a couple of months back. They've just been
Certainly
hitting them
that
every single night.
operation was in planning for years.
So just the dynamic of costing them money, though, wouldn't that restriction being removed by the Trump transition team and the Trump government endorsing it while the Biden administration was saying don't take offensive measures too deep into Russia, wouldn't that alone be the cost-benefit analysis you want?
So if that's in isolation, this is the problem. Like in isolation, if what you're saying is true, then yes, I think that was a good move. However, Trump has also signaled to Putin again and again and again that he's willing to stop supporting Ukraine. Do you know why a lot of the recent gains Russia has been able to make is because the U.S. stopped sharing our intel under Trump? They're like, we're just going to stop sharing our intel with you to Ukraine. We're just not going to share our intel. And that has allowed Putin to gain much more territory than he otherwise would have. And so, like this talking out of both sides of your mouth that Trump does with this, like, yeah, you can strike deeper to Ukraine, but also we're going to turn off all intelligence sharing with you for a while. And
Okay, so I answered your hypothetical. I'm sorry,
go ahead,
Dylan,
please.
But I would like to
Wick,
ask a hypothetical.
can I ask you, Wick, how do you know that? Because from my conversations with soldiers, it is true that probably the intelligence cut had an effect in the Kursk area for a very short period of time, but this intelligence cut was very brief. So, like, all of the recent gains are probably not due to a lack of intelligence sharing.
I was going to say the same thing. It's odd that I'm aligning with Dylan on this one, but that's insanity, frankly.
You don't.
That
So
you
you
talk-
don't
that
think
you're
that they
talking about.
cut
Wait,
off?
There's no proof it actually even
Wait,
affected the Kursk gains, but
Well, it's insanity to think that Ukraine
I'm just talking
doesn't
about what
have
I've
their
said,
own
what I've heard.
intelligence.
no,
It's-
I agree with you actually. on
No,
this.
Ukraine
know.
has its own intelligence, but a lot of its munitions, its weapons and stuff relied on our satellites, our intelligence sharing, our kind of giving them like targeting info.
Which
things
Yeah,
weapons?
like
no,
that.
but this is true, Wick. But this is specifically true for the Kursk incursion in a short period where we cut off intelligence sharing, and there was concern about how that affected our use of those weapons in that specific area, and whether or not that's true. The Russians believed it could be true, and so they engaged in an offensive operation, trying to exploit what they thought was an intelligence window. And ultimately, that did lead to the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces. You could paint a picture that might, maybe after the war is over, once signal intelligence has been revealed, could say that it had an impact. But outside of that specific time window, I don't think the intelligence cuts are having an impact on the front line.
I disagree. I think that obviously
Well,
when you
okay,
cut off
how much is a
intelligence-
massive amount of ground lost? Can you define that for me?
no.
Okay, even more important question.
Like,
before I
how
get to
much
my
is a
Dylan
matter
agreeing on
of
something,
please,
it's probably the
please.
case. Okay.
If it-
Like,
12 miles?
Now listen, let me be
21
clear.
miles?
Please, let me be clear here. Like I think that I am woefully ignorant of the actual situation on the ground in Ukraine because so much propaganda comes out of both sides. But I do try to read information on all sides of the ledger. Dylan, to his credit, is on the ground and talking to people who are literally fighting. He's telling you what he's heard from them. You're like, I disagree. Great. Your source is?
My sources, people in. Let me get some reports out for you. I'll get the sources.
Like
don't worry.
I can just say, like, I did like a short doc on the border about the Kursk incursion.
But you agree
and,
with me
like-
that they did cut off intelligence, at least for a time.
Well, yeah, they cut off intelligence. The question is whether it had an impact. But if it did have an impact, it was only probably in
sure.
Kursk. If it
But
had
Rob,
any impact at all.
so to be clear, Rob,
which is none
he's
of the
not
recent
disagreeing with
gains.
me on the fact
Yes.
of the matter. He's disagreeing with me on if it had an effect.
No. He's disagreeing on materially what you said when you said if you see the recent gains that Russia has made. And Dylan's saying, no, there's only a chance that that affected a small window. He's saying we don't know how much that intelligence was shut off. Now, we can say that Russia probably believed it and it probably caused them to aggress. But he's saying we don't know exactly how much that loss of intelligence is to blame for
Okay,
that.
I can't
However,
give you an
that
exact
would
number
be
of
the
how
only
much
area in
ground
a
was
limited
lost
window.
because of this, but I can
Dylan's
tell
right
you
on this.
pretty with a large and a high degree of confidence that when you cut off intelligence sharing, that it causes you to be less effective a less effective fighting force, which will allow a better fighting force to beat you.
Well,
right?
I'm not denying that, Wick, but we're talking
Yes.
about a time span of about 1 week where this occurred, and I'm sure it had an effect. I talked to soldiers who told me how it affected them, and I feel bad about what happened, but that was a week. And, it's been months and months since then, and recent advances on either the Pokrovsk sector or the Konstantinivka sector, and I filmed all of these sectors in the last 2 months. I've talked to the soldiers about why they're losing land. None of them tell me it has to do with a lack of intelligence. It might have to do with they want more drones in the sky to gather intelligence, but nothing when it comes to a lack of intelligence sharing from the United States government. There's
But
always
even
the
losing
threat of it
Kursk,
being
is
cut off
that
again,
not
but
is that not enough to say that was a pretty crippling blow to Ukraine?
if that had the impact that it could have had, which we don't know, then maybe. But I still think it would have been one of many contributing factors that would have pushed them out of Kursk. There was many other problems they had.
I'm not suggesting that this is the only reason that Russia has made gains in the past, but I
Will
am
you
saying
at
it's
least take
contributing
back your
factor.
will you take back your statement that when you said the recent gains that we've seen of Russia, that so far you provided
Sure,
no
I'll restrict it
evidence?
to Kursk.
Okay, fair enough. I wanted to
Sure.
ask you a hypothetical. You asked me this hypothetical in the world.
After
of
that,
if-
by the way, Rob, after that, could I answer your question?
Yes, yes. You asked me
Okay.
this hypothetical about what if we knew that Putin would never accept any
Sure.
peaceful resolution, that he'd never stop. Let's do with my hypothetical. Let's say that Putin actually does want a resolution. There's just things that he wants to see negotiated, like guarantees that they get to keep some of the land, or guarantees that Ukraine won't join NATO, etc. So hypothetically, you have to agree now that Putin does want that. Who would be more likely to bring a peaceful resolution? The guy who's sitting down with Putin and trying to bring him in and facilitate a meeting between Putin and Zelensky, or the people that you advocated for that said, no, we're not going to sit down in the room with Putin, such as Kamala and Biden?
Obviously, the one who is willing to sit down in the room.
Thanks.
The question becomes, are the things that Putin is requiring in order to get peace in this hypothetical something that A, the Ukrainians are willing to accept? Because if they're not willing to accept it, it doesn't matter for the same reason. And B, are they something that would result in actual lasting peace? Or
I
would they
believe-
simply be like a Treaty of Versailles type of situation that's going to lead to just more conflict in the future?
I will be happy to address this later, but I definitely want to leave Dylan get a shot in
Sure.
there. Suffice
Yeah,
it to
and then
say,
I
though,
wanna ask
at
a
least
question
when
after
it comes
Dylan. Go
to a
ahead.
potential peaceful resolution, you're saying there is no potential because Putin will say no, therefore we'll go with the people that didn't even attempt. I'm saying, in answer to Gibbs' question, Trump is best positioned because at least he's willing to take the meeting, which would be the only chance of a peaceful resolution.
Let's go to Dylan. Then I want to ask a question after that. Go ahead.
Sure, I want to make sure that we get to the stuff on the table so we can actually talk to
Yeah,
substantive
that's where
about
we're
the
going
Donbass
next, yeah.
and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
as for the hypothetical, of course, we're just playing games here. We're just playing partisan games. We're taking who would have done better. I don't know for sure because Harris is completely untested when it comes to this type of high-profile diplomacy, and people like me were making the bet that the people around her, like Dr. Philip Gordon, who was her national security advisor as vice president, and was going to become her national security advisor if she became president, would have had enough knowledge, having worked in the region before, that they could have guided her towards a policy that would have been able to keep pressure on the Russians until they'd be able to make a deal that would have been more agreeable to both European and American security interests. And whether or not you think that would have taken 1 year, 2 years, 3 years to keep on that pressure until the Russians would be more willing to negotiate under terms, like, for example, at least a frozen front line instead of giving us stuff that we haven't even taken yet. I don't know how long that would have taken, but what I do know is that her threats would have been taken more seriously. One of the problems I have with Trump diplomacy is that he's a big talker. And sometimes that's good when he needs to get a message out there, but sometimes that's bad when he just doesn't know to stop talking when he's ahead. And so he'll go out there and he'll say he'll do things, and then he doesn't do those things, and then that degrades his credibility. When we go from a 24-hour peace deal to a 100-day peace deal to 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and we keep kicking this can down the road, and we threaten to do this, and you have to give us an unconditional ceasefire right now, we're going to do X, Y, and Z, and then none of those things are delivered upon, eventually the reputation that is builds, and I read the Russian papers. Of course, they have to be translated first, But I read the Russian papers, and they say that, look, Putin, Trump says a lot. He's a big talker, but you always have to wait till he actually does something. And so far, he hasn't really done much of anything when it comes to deliveries on either big weapons or the big 500% sanctions that he talked about on the campaign trail, that then he is fighting with Lindsey Graham on, watering them down. So it seems to be that message stays inconsistent. He doesn't deliver on his threats, and he's making some of the worst mistakes that Obama did of red lines that you don't deliver on, and it makes it much harder to get an end goal. Maybe Harris would have been a lot more prickly and would have not had the meeting in Alaska. Okay, maybe it would have been in Oman or a more traditional location if they did have the meeting. But I do think that when she says, I'm going to tariff you at this rate, that the Russians would believe it.
I don't know.
Let me-
I'll say this. There's unpredictability with Trump, as I said earlier. I'll just say this real quick. He bombed Iran. People said, oh, the same dude, that would be a red line they didn't cross. They crossed that red line and he bombed them. But I think that what we're talking about here, Dylan, is with Kamala, it may have taken longer, but put Ukraine in a better negotiating position. I'm saying who had the best chance to get a ceasefire or a potential peace deal in the short term? And I think that's Trump. The difference is
Trump,
No, we know Trump hasn't.
real quick,
Right? Trump has not done that.
but he has
Well-
a better possibility than Kamala did, and certainly better than Biden did while Kamala was his VP, which didn't. But I just want to say this: the difference would be the terms of that potential deal probably will be less favorable than what either of you two would like for the perspective of Ukraine. But that's what happens when you're negotiating from the position of the loser, of the side that's losing. You're going to negotiate from the position of weakness.
Let's
But
move
I
this away
believe,
from.
let me just say quickly, I believe that the key difference is that the Russians have to be compelled. And that's what I think Harris would be more willing to do.
So I want to move this a little bit away from the alt history, what if kind of scenario. If we want to do that, we can just write a book and we can read it later. But here's what I want to talk about now is what is going to be realistic coming up. Like, what can we expect? I know people have talked about, they're going to cede land, and then that's against the Ukrainian constitution. What do we think is realistic outcomes? I mean, obviously, continued war is obviously a realistic outcome. But like, what are outcomes that could lead to peace or to some kind of what do we think are realistically within the realm of possibility? Let's talk about that.
Realistically, unfortunately, I don't
We'll
think
get to
there is
Tyler.
going to be a peace deal. It's going to continue to, at least not in the near future. I think the war drags on for at least another year. I don't see a peace coming anytime soon.
All right, Tyler, you look like you had your hand up there. What do you want to think?
Okay, so after the 60 days or the 60-day thing to Iran, that day 61 is the day that Israel hit. I think it sent a message that, like, look, we're not fucking around. Trump said, like, he's at an end of his patience with Russia, and now he's starting to go after their trade allies. Their economy's really hurting. Their inflation's sitting at like 8% right now. They're having a rough time economically, and right now they're talking about even more sanctions to hurt them, even more tariffs against their allies. That being said, the deal that puts Russia not in the stronger position, even though they are the superior military and probably would win if the conflict was prolonged. The fact that they're hurting on a different end takes them out of that position of strength that they're broadcasting on a single factor analysis. But if you look at Ukraine polling right now, the Ukrainian population is generally wanting a sooner stop to the war, even though they still prefer winning. Their conditions of winning are changing, and right now the majority are willing to give up Crimea. And some are even saying they'd like to see the land bridge given up to stop the war sooner. But I don't think that's the majority right now. I think that's just a growing minority of voters. Only 32% think they're going to be let into NATO, but 52% think the EU is still on the table. And I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see admission into the EU. We're going to see security guarantees. What the administration's saying right now is they're going to be similar to Article 5, like in the spirit of, but without boots on the ground. So I feel like as soon as if the Russian aggression kicks up again, there's going to be that NATO alliance doing the same funding thing they're doing right now, and maybe air support next time. If we had NATO air support, just dominating Ukraine, maybe not offensive, but making sure that Ukraine had air superiority over its own country, then I think we'd see Russia deterred from future attacks, and I think we see that within the next 6 months.
I don't see it ever coming from NATO. I don't see.
I don't
they've
think-
been very firm on that.
I think if you put NATO planes over Ukraine, Putin will escalate. He is 100% no NATO, no NATO in Ukraine. You put NATO in Ukraine, it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. So I think you're absolutely off base on that. I agree that having a coalition air force or something like that was not tied to NATO, yeah, sure. But if it says NATO on it, Putin's going to be so pissed he won't even be able to see straight.
Why
The
is the
problem
difference
we're
between
running
a coalition and NATO though? Why, like, say the Baltic states send people in? Why is it going to
I
be
have
different?
no fucking clue what the
They're not
difference
gonna.
is, to be honest. But there's but Putin's been very clear about the NATO thing.
Well,
Well,
here's the difference. Well, real quick, I mean, the difference is going to be, like, if it's NATO, if there's the risk of some kind of an actual Article 5 involving all of NATO, this is going to be like substantially different than a guarantee from some countries that don't involve military bases being put in Ukraine. Because again, that's what they initially were very firm about. We don't want NATO military bases on our border, like on the Ukrainian border. They've been very clear about that.
Dylan?
So I just want to say, like, I understand that, you know, the NATO, I mean, it's, you don't want to put them in NATO. That's a big thing on Putin. The problem's going to be whatever we propose is going to end up looking a hell of a lot like NATO. And when you listen to the Russians, it's not just not NATO, it's not NATO-like. And in response to the recent comments from the administration, hey, Russia-backed security guarantees, the Russians have been very clear that it needs to address their core concerns and that it can't be NATO-like. And then I try to think, okay, what does that mean? Well, I could see them saying, well, if there's any NATO countries that are in this, that's NATO-like, because NATO countries, the countries in Europe that's on our flank. So obviously, if it's France, Germany, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, that doesn't work because that's basically NATO. And everything that I think up of, all of the nations that largely support Ukraine that would join this are NATO countries. And so to create a security architecture that is not within NATO, but is going to be kind of like NATO, that the Russians are going to agree to when they say they won't even allow anything that's even like NATO, seems to me like a fool's errand. And so again, it's something you're going to either need to make the Russians accept. They're going to have to accept something that's at least like NATO that would stop them from invading in the future. If it's half the NATO countries, or if it's a third of the NATO countries participating, or if it's just American air support instead of ground forces, which is something that I've heard being floated around, which quite honestly, while I'm not perfectly happy about it, I'd at least be more happy about it than the Ukrainians being completely left up in the air and us just hoping that the Russians' good graces will not invade again. But I mean, ever since back in 2022, the Russians have wanted to make sure that once this war is over, it'd be as easy as physically possible for them to invade again. When people talk about the deal being made in 2022, one thing that's often not mentioned is the only reason it failed was because the Russians continued to demand that the Ukrainians disarm. And after Ukraine was invaded twice within a decade, they were not comfortable disarming themselves, as any nation, any of us put in their position, would either be. And that is the demand that they have yet to back off of. So it's very hard for me to imagine, if they don't even want Ukraine to have its own army, how it's going to be able to, at this point, without the conditions changing, agree to a security architecture that would stop an invasion. I think we're going to have to change a lot on the ground.
Lecto, before you get to that, just two things real quick. Now, I have to admit that I'm ill-read on the current events on what exactly Russia's saying or what their demands may be. So this is just me spitballing, but two possible things. Maybe one potential solution is that there would be a coalition of some sort of peacekeeping force that would involve some of those Western countries, but maybe it includes people that Russia feels more allied with that maybe the West isn't comfortable with, like China. Maybe it includes a coalition of having forces from a country that Russia would trust more, also being there in a coalition with countries that Ukraine would trust more. I don't know if that's a possibility, and that probably leads to a bunch.
I'll agree with that. I'm fine with 100,000 Chinese troops in the Donbass if it stopped people from dying. I quite frankly don't give a fuck.
Right.
But I still don't think they're going to agree to it, because I think that would make it even harder for them to invade, because then they wouldn't just be pissing off the United States and Europe. They'd be shooting Chinese soldiers, or at least telling them to skedaddle in the next 24 hours before we try our 3.0 operation.
Now, that could lead to other headaches as well, not just what you're talking about there, but potential conflict between like NATO and Chinese troops, which could lead to a bunch of other shit. Nonetheless, that's one potentiality. I think, though, that ultimately Trump, in his speech that he gave in Saudi Arabia, sort of outlined what his belief on foreign policy is, which I think was a seminal speech. That's one of the most important foreign policy speeches that he'll ever give. Basically, to cut it short, he's sort of saying, we don't give a shit that you countries may be immoral. We don't really give a shit what China's doing to the Uyghur Muslims. We want trade deals. We want to make money. We want you to make money. And it's no longer our job to be the world police, particularly when it comes to internal conflicts that you're having within your own country. I think that Trump originally had sort of a 3-point plan, and that he's pissed off that Zelensky sort of on the public stage put a hole in it. And I think that's because leaders in Europe didn't want that plan to succeed. And I think that plan was, one, to get some sort of mineral deal, which that would allow the United States to have an excuse to be at least some sort of presence in Ukraine. Second was to get a ceasefire. And third was to then negotiate a peace deal. I think then the fourth plank of that would go on to sort of section 3 there would be that he's going to go to Putin and be like, look, man, I'm not the old regime. The slate will be sort of wiped clean. Let's do some business deals. Let's agree to trade. Let's agree to no sanctions. Let's be profitable for both of our country. That strategy, the two things that's unique, that maybe would be willing to overcome any sort of desire Russia has that's like, we don't want these hostile nations close to our border, would be, one, they think that it would be profitable for them and the West in order to engage in these trade deals, which means that they'll open up their economy, and Putin could sell that as a huge victory back home. Plus, they'd get to keep some of the gains that they had on the ground in places like Crimea. And the other thing that it would do is it gives the United States an excuse to be there, at least in a contracting way. And so now if Russia invades, they're not just taking Ukrainians, they're taking U.S. contractors that are on the ground and mineral rights and land that is owned by the United States. And so Trump would look at Putin and say, listen, if you fuck around again, you're not just attacking Ukraine, you're attacking U.S. soil or U.S. ownership. And that means that we'll sell it
In
to the American people.
2022, didn't we have
I
U.S.
promise,
companies
last
based
sentence,
in
Vic,
Ukraine?
then I'll be able to sell it to the American people that it's not just attacking a foreign nation that you're not interested, someone like me is not interested in, but now it's attacking U.S. assets.
And correct me, I might be wrong on this. I'm tired. Excuse me. Maybe I'm thinking something different, but I'm pretty sure in 2022 we had Americans in Ukraine. We had American companies based in Ukraine. Or in things like that. Am I wrong on this?
No, that's certainly true, but it's
Yeah.
different.
So why
than-
would
Who
it
is
suddenly
the
be,
mercenaries there?
yeah, why
who
would
is
it suddenly
president?
be different when we had a mineral deal?
Because
Who
the
is
nature of
if it-
president?
having U.S. citizens and U.S. companies in Ukraine in 2022 did not prevent Ukraine,
Location.
Russia from coming in and invading Ukraine.
Because
Why
nobody
would
was afraid of
mineral
Biden doing shit.
do that?
No,
But
it's-
Putin could just say, "I'll give you a better
So
deal."
Trump is like scarier. That would have
No,
done
it's not just
Yeah.
that, and it's not just location, though location is a better answer there, right? The real answer is because there is a different connection to we own stake in this country as American citizens, as opposed to random businesses, contractors, and yes, Lactoid's
Hold on.
right,
American
mercenaries.
citizens own stake in those companies.
Right, but that's not the American people. Like, for example,
Well,
American citizens own stake in
Not a
Microsoft,
government deal.
but
in
that
the same
doesn't
way.
mean that the people, if Microsoft has an office in France,
I
that the
just don't
American
think
people
that would-
own some of the land in France. You
I don't
understand the
think that a
difference?
mineral deal would be a deterrent at all to Putin.
I think it's a
he'd just
better
make deal.
possibility. I think it's a better possibility, and at least it's a plan. Zelensky
I
shit
don't think
on it.
Russia's, like, been
Zelensky
targeting
went with the WIC
Well,
route, and
US
how'd that
embassy.
read for
Wait,
Zelensky?
wait. Okay. The reason Zelensky shot on it was number one, it was right off the bat giving the United States a lot of ownership of Ukraine's infrastructure, and it was a pretty overbearing deal at the start, which is how Trump negotiates. And Trump has admitted about this, that he basically starts by offering you to be raped, and then you have to negotiate a way
big
for him
ask.
to do something outside of that. Okay, to put it bluntly. And so, of course, at the start, he was going to react like, no, I can't give you ownership of all of my bridges. No, I can't give you ownership of all of my ports in the middle of this situation. So, we could say he pissed
whole
on it, but
nuclear plant,
he
right?
got it done. He went to a RADA that hated it, and eventually he got it done and he got it through. And so eventually at the other end there, we did get that, but I still see it as a cop-out. I understand the argument that the ownership of mineral rights could show an American interest in Ukraine, but America already displayed its interest in Ukraine previously through things like the Budapest Memorandum, through investments that we've engaged in, through military deals that both Trump, Biden, and Obama have all done with the Ukrainians and sending over these weapons or that weapons or XYZ. So the United States had already made clear its stated interest in the Russians not invading Ukraine again. And I don't see how specifically this mineral deal over mineral deposits that are not even being extracted right now, none of the infrastructure's in place, all of the research to even see if it would be worth the investment has not even been done, how that's going to stop the Russians from invading again when they're blowing up like U.S. companies' offices on the daily, like Boeing was blowed up in the middle of a negotiation. So it's just, I understand the argument, it's just balancing a lot of lives on very little.
Three things real quick. One, the way that Zelensky went against this, he had every right. I thought that the ask was a lot too of Trump. He had every right to disagree with it in private. Instead, what he did was seemingly go along with it. And then after talking to the Europeans, decide to go public and shit on the plan, which of course has the predictable results that Trump and JD Vance told him to pound sand. How'd that work out for Zelensky? When you were reliant
We got a better
on,
mineral deal.
what's that?
We got a much better
Yeah,
mineral
it
deal. The
worked
mineral
out
deal that
pretty
ended up
well.
passing
Yeah.
was much better than the original.
That's fine. He could have got that same deal without publicly discrediting it,
Could he?
and would have probably been in a better position if Trump not basically
Hold
telling him
on.
to eat shit for months.
Why? Why do you say that? Why do you say he could have gotten a better deal? If he had signed the original deal, why? What incentive would Trump or the administration have to give him a better one? He'd already signed it.
He wouldn't have got a better deal if he already signed the original deal. My implication
Okay,
is,
so
Wick,
to Dylan's point,
listen real quick. Listen. Maybe you'll learn something. You ready, Wick? What I'm saying is he should have voiced his displeasure at that deal privately when the negotiations were occurring, instead of seemingly agreeing with it and then going public and bitching about Trump and Vance's plan.
and
They could
then
have
what
got a
you
better
said
deal if
after
in
that,
private,
and
in-
then what you said after that was, how did it work out for him?
It did
How
not
did it
work-
work out for Zelensky? And then Dylan came back with, actually, he got a better deal. So that's the world we're living in.
The world
Maybe
we're
if you
living
pay
in.
more attention, you do a little better at these things. Okay.
Hey, Wick,
so
why did
we-
the
the
you
question
just said,
is-
let's go
the
through
question
Wick's
is,
line of thought.
why do you think if they had signed the original deal that Trump would give him a better one in the future?
So
What
again,
what
you-
evidence do you have that that's the
You
case?
go back to a hypothetical that I never endorsed. I said that they shouldn't have signed the initial deal. Now, Wick, before you got embarrassed by the person on your side and said the recent gains
Hold
were
on.
because of
He-
what, please
he
don't
didn't
interrupt,
embarrass
Wick.
me. I
know,
think he was just
Wick,
incorrect.
Wick, please, Dylan wasn't incorrect. You have no evidence, and you were forced to say, okay, I'm
Hold
just
on.
talking about the
No,
correct reason.
he agreed
Yes.
with me at the facts of the matter. He just disagreed with the effect.
Hey, Dylan, did you agree with Wick that the quote recent gains of Russia was because of
Hold
a
on, the
lack
facts
of
of the matter.
intelligence sharing?
Did we or did we
Shut up,
not
Wick.
cut off
Leave him
intelligence?
answer. Leave him answer.
Did we or
big
did
man.
we? Because you're asking
Leave
a
him
question
answer.
that I'm not asking.
Shut up.
You're
Leave him
basically
answer.
you're shadow
I'm
boxing.
fighting.
Yeah,
Okay,
listen,
here's the deal.
Moving on to the
Here's the
substance.
deal.
Moving on to
I'm
substance.
Did
gonna-
he
if Wick's gonna
or
argue
did
with me,
Getting
then-
divorced.
Yes or no? Did Trump cut off intelligence sharing with Ukraine? Yes or no?
Wick, I'm uninterested in moving on to your
Okay,
question.
so you
as
can't
you're
answer
still-
the
Yes or no,
question.
Rob?
It's
Got
not that
it.
I can't. It's
Got it.
You're
Understood.
Pub quiz, Rob.
You are incapable. You are incapable of listening
Understood.
to someone and not interrupting constantly. It's all that you could do because you
Yep,
constantly
yep,
look like
yep,
a fool.
yep.
You constantly
be-
look like a fool. The point
Let-
is, what I was going to say is, you were proven wrong about this intel sharing. The
You were
question
wrong
matters-
about that. You can
I
say
was
that all the
not-
time, but you're just incorrect.
Okay, then
You're
let's
proven
say
wrong
Dylan-
about that. You were proven wrong about the mineral deal. You keep just saying that you're in and uninformed, and that's the only true thing you've said all night.
Let's
No.
Gibbs,
Absolutely.
Gib, I'm not just going to move on.
You're trying real hard, and I can tell, and this is struggle
After
for
this
you.
bat ends, I'll go.
Wick,
After this
if
bat
you would
goes.
be quiet. One, you were absolutely wrong, as I'm sure Dylan.
That's not
will-
true.
Dylan, will you acknowledge that you thought Wick's statement was incorrect, that the recent gains were because of a lack of intel sharing? Will you acknowledge that?
I'll answer that if you let me answer your question and generally around this later.
Sure.
I
Okay,
acknowledge
yeah,
that.
yeah,
I'm
no,
gonna need a
it
fucking
was
blowjob
the
after
recent
this.
gains
It's
are not
terrible.
due to intelligence cuts
Oh,
anyway.
It's a
but
curse law.
before Wick feels the need, Wick just said that's incorrect. You agreed with him, so you
I-
would say that Wick's then
Okay.
doubling down.
That's not what I said was
That is what you
incorrect.
said. Now, I'll
That's not
finish
what I
on.
said was
Now, I'll finish
incorrect.
on. Let's see if Wick's capable of actually listening for a second and answering something in good faith. Now that he's been proven to be wrong again, Wick.
Hold on,
why
that's
did
not-
the United
again-
States, Wick, at what point and why did the United States stop sharing intel with Ukraine? Dylan, would you like to answer it? This fucking buffoon has no
I got
clue.
it pulled up.
Hold on.
It's
Why are
more-
you talking about that when we should be talking about the mineral deal, which you got wrong?
I didn't get the mineral deal.
You
wrong.
did get the mineral deal
What
wrong. You
part
made a
did I get
statement.
wrong?
Ken,
You made a statement saying that if he had signed and not got
I
off
never
in public
said if he
about it,
signed. Where did I say it? Point to the timestamp. I said the exact opposite.
I'm not going to
I-
go. I can't. I don't have a
Let me-
timestamp
let me-
for you.
Let me repeat.
Hold
what
on.
I
Did
said.
you or did you not make a quip
No.
saying that? How'd that work out for Zelensky? Did you
I
say
did
that? Yes
make
or
that
no?
clip. Now, I
Okay.
did not
And when
say-
Dylan responded to you that it worked out pretty well, Is that what he responded? Yes or
Didn't
no?
respond that, and where
Okay,
does
he
that
did
mean-
respond that yes or
Okay,
no.
so where-
Okay.
So where
And
is
then
that?
you said, well, if he had signed it, he would have gotten a better
Alright,
deal in
children.
response to
Uncle
that.
Gibbs, make them
Children,
stop fighting.
children, enough.
No,
Listen, I know
I'm gonna
Destiny's
give
in
I'm
the
you
just
news,
less-
right.
but the
I'm gonna
pedantic
give-
I'm
Destiny
just
debate's
correct.
out. We don't
And
need
Rob,
to do today.
instead
I-
of acknowledging the fact that he got BT,
I'm
I'm muting both of you. All right, we're moving on. All right, Lactoid, go ahead. Calm down. I want to move on to conversation
If you want to move
instead
on,
of
that's
arguing.
fine.
He said, she
But I
said.
just want to say, I'll keep
All
that
right,
heavily
go ahead,
in mind
Lactoid,
the
please.
next time
Take
you
it.
ask
no,
for me to
I'm-
come onto a
I'm-
panel. I don't appreciate the
Yep,
filibuster
yep,
strategy.
go ahead.
Where I can't answer
Lactoid,
this
you're
question
going, Lactoid.
briefly.
Lactoid's
for
going.
for a Ukraine debate, I feel surprisingly calm. I'm surprised at the current dynamics, but so I'm going to calmly. I think I'm going to disagree with something, Dylan, you said respectfully. I don't think that obviously the terms in 2022 Istanbul, especially when we're talking about March as opposed to later, like a little bit later in April. I don't think the disarming clause was necessarily the sticking point, right? I mean, both Turkey and U.S. officials were saying that they more or less most the big sticking point was recognition of Crimea and the Donbass, according to Turkey, and then according to U.S. officials, they more or less had a deal worked out. And then that was, kind of stalled. Now there's some questions as to why did it stall, and I think part of that is because the Ukrainians started experiencing some significant battlefield victories, especially in that early portion of the war, and perhaps that they thought, well, if this continues, we'll be able to, push them out of everything, right? That could, and then obviously they attempted the offensive down into Kherson and Zaporizhia, and that didn't work out. But that really, I think, was the kind of mindset and the attempt. And you can respond to that in a second. If we're going to look at what do we actually think the result's going to be, I agree we're probably not going to get peace like very soon, unfortunately. It'll probably be a little bit more fighting before we get to that. But we have some idea as to what for sure is going to happen. So the current maximalist Russian demands prior to the meeting were that Ukraine must significantly reduce its army and limit armaments. Ukraine must permanently renounce NATO membership. Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk, and Luhansk all come under Russian control, and Ukraine recognizes it. I think that's going to be a big one. Ukraine moves towards joining the EU, and the USA and Europe lift all sanctions against Russia. Right off the bat, and of course now we have kind of reiteration of the 2022 idea of some kind of safety guarantees, and we can discuss how that would look. Given that the maximalist Russian position has Ukraine joining EU, I think it's pretty fair that's going to happen as long as the EU is on board with letting that happen. I actually think the biggest impediment there might be the EU, and I don't even think that's going to be a pretty
what are the
big
requirements
impediment.
to like how I actually don't know this. What's the process look like for joining the EU? Is it similar to the NATO where individual countries can veto it?
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
An individual country can veto membership. The
In the
Hungarians,
EU?
for example, have said that they'll never do it. That they'll never allow it.
There's
Yeah.
that. There's also like a lot of like compliance requirements for the EU like perception on like human rights, et cetera, that Ukraine is currently not in compliance with. And in 2020 and 2014, or in 2013, for example, when one of the big reasons why the accession deal was put on hold is because one of the EU demands was that the prior president be released from prison. This was a demand, like in order to continue on with the agreements. This was one of the demands that the EU made. So it's possible that the EU becomes just doesn't allow Ukraine in because they're not meeting its own requirements, or there's vetoes from particular states. But I think Russia's given in their concession, basically Ukraine will go to the EU.
I don't think
So-
that's a real concession, Lactoid, and I'll tell you why. It's because of that clause where an EU nation can actually veto it. And I think
That's
Russia
not up to
knows.
Russia, though.
I think Russia knows that will happen, right? This is something they could give up that doesn't actually cost them anything, and they can say, sure, it can join EU, knowing very well it will never be allowed to.
Well, no, it actually does cost them because in 2013, in November 2013, one of the big things they're pushing for was a trilateral trade deal between the EU, Ukraine, and Russia. And the fact that now they're basically saying, Ukraine's just going to go to the EU without a requirement of some kind of trilateral trade deal, and especially not even, which, if they were playing more hardball, they could probably put. I mean, I don't know how feasible this would be, but they would potentially push some kind of relationship with Ukraine with their own customs union. But they're not pushing that. They're just saying, okay, Ukraine moves towards joining the EU, assuming that the EU lets them. I think that would probably happen as long as the EU is okay with it. The US and Europe lifting all sanctions against Russia, I think that'll probably happen as well. I don't think Ukraine. I mean, they might like protest it, but that's not going to be like a huge sticking point for them because it's.
What about
them.
Ukraine losing territory? Like giving up territory. What's the likelihood there? And
so that's I think the territory question I think is going to be the biggest sticking point, and I think by far, I think the current appetite is like the public statements have been we're not even giving Crimea. Now, this is probably, pretty aggressive, pretty like bombastic sort of language. I'm guessing that they're probably to some extent, are willing to negotiate when it comes to Crimea. When it comes to the rest of it, like especially if we're talking about some kind of recognition, that I think is going to be the hardest thing to get the Ukrainian leadership on board with, especially, and I understand why, especially ceding land that the Russians currently don't control. And that was one of the requests that Russia made in order to get a ceasefire, which is the remaining fourth of Donetsk would be transferred to Russian control with the rest of the front line being frozen. Now, one of the problems from like just a Ukrainian military perspective is that a lot of their military assets and fortifications and a more favorable terrain is all in Donetsk. So they're obviously going to be pretty skeptical of that and pretty concerned to hand that over. I think that's going to be a big sticking point as well. But in terms of, the EU, I think sanctions are going to be an issue. I think NATO membership probably is not going to be an issue because I think that, obviously, that's kind of the pie in the sky goal, but I think that that's just not going to happen. I think the real question is what's a security guarantee going to look like? And I think you're probably going to see it look like what was proposed in 2022, which is like the UK and the US, and at that time, maybe now it'll be the UK and France or something, are going to have a guarantee on Ukraine, not their own military bases there, but a guarantee on Ukraine that if Ukraine is attacked, that they're going to come, that they're going to directly intervene and they're going to send their own military assets over to help them. I could see that happening.
Dylan, you were saying something.
I was supposed to respond to like Rob's question like a while ago.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
That was awesome, by the way.
We got to get some control, a little bit of control there. Go ahead, Dylan.
Yeah, so the way that it was rejected, when you say Zelensky rejected it publicly, well, it was also put on Ukraine in very extraordinary circumstances where they essentially had Secretary Bassett walk up to the Ukrainian leadership, give it to them and say, approve this in the next few hours. It gave him the original, what I refer to as the rape deal, which maybe I should, but it was really, really bad. And so the government was then attacked with a public pressure campaign of how they had to accept it right away. So there's a public pressure campaign. They're given a very short time window. The circumstances by which the government was put, maybe they could have just stayed quiet and say, we're not saying anything publicly, and they could have continued that. But they were put in a situation where not a lot of governments really would have known what to do there either. As for whether or not like the 2022 demilitarization, whether that was a big deal, from everything that I read, at least from My Enemies Will Vanish, and that I read about it being a pretty big contributing factor. It seemed to be a pretty big contributing factor because they were debating and they disagreed upon, and this was one of the big breaks, the exact limitations that should be placed on Ukrainian tank, artillery, and personnel. Because before the war, they had 250,000 troops, and the Russians wanted to cap them at 75,000. And considering like how the war played out at 75,000 troops with a country as big as Ukraine, you can't defend Ukraine. They also wanted to cap the tanks and artillery systems, ammunition storage, Air Force, all sorts of stuff, the Navy as well, but essentially make it so that the Ukrainian military was had its balls cut off and could not defend against another attack. This was then compounded by the fact that, yes, the Russians made a ton of military blunders, stubbed their toe a bunch, got fucked up, and then a bunch of atrocities got revealed, like what happened in Bucha and a lot of certain things that the Russians did that so soiled their reputation that it made negotiating very difficult as the bodies were still being taken off the street hot. So I think that the reason that negotiations failed in 2022, when we talk about the most leverage then, as long as there was demand about demilitarization, no demilitarized Ukrainian state can retain any leverage, let alone a lot of leverage. As for, I think we're talking about like where this is gonna go. I don't want to like go across every single bit because I'm sure we could. The one area I just want to focus on is Under no circumstances should the Ukrainians be told to give up the rest of the Donbass. Under no circumstances should this be done. The United States will be made to look like a fool if the Russians relaunch the war, and they will be avoiding every single main defensible position that the Ukrainians have worked on building there in the last few years. I was on the Konstantinivka front line 2 months ago. And when I was out there, every time that I drove to there and out of there, I could see tons of tank ditches, anti-tank ditches, tons of barbed wire put up to catch motorcycle troops assaulting. And I've been all across the Ukrainian front line. It is no more concentrated than it is in front of the city of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, which are seen as the last free capitals of the Donetsk region. And so to give up the heights, to give up the tank ditches, to give up all these investments and all this defensible position to the Russians without a fight for a ceasefire, not for a cessation of hostilities permanently with structures in place, but for a ceasefire where they supposedly could restart the war in a month or 2 months. I mean, it would be seen as national betrayal. It would be seen as stupid. And it's also destroying some of the only leverage the Ukrainians still have left. Not to mention, it would be forcing a lot of people to leave their homes. And I don't want to force anybody to leave their homes when it's not necessary.
What about the
Can
region?
I ask a quick clarifying question on that? In the event that Russia continues advancing, especially in Donetsk, and then similar to Luhansk, it does occupy all of Donetsk at some point. Do you think
Most
that?
of Luhansk, but yeah.
I mean, like 99% at this point. There's like a small, tiny chunk.
Well, yeah, I've been to that tiny chunk, so I know it's still there.
Okay.
So.
Sure. If they occupy 99% then of Donetsk, there's a tiny little chunk somewhere that's not currently occupied, let's say.
Spansky Forest, yeah.
Do you think then at that point the Ukrainians, like, in order to get some kind of lasting peace deal, let's say, that does have some kind of security assurances that are acceptable to you, do you think that the Ukrainians should be open to ceding all of Donetsk at that point, once it's been militarily lost?
You mean if they lose all of the Donetsk region, whether they should give it up in negotiations for a final settlement? If they lose all of it in negotiations and there's no way to return it, then accepting that as the current status quo, I think is just like inevitable in a situation like that. As for formally recognizing the annexation of every single piece of land that has been taken, I mean, I think that's going to be difficult to get any government to accept, especially if the Russian government does not in the same breath accept that Kherson and Zaporizhia will never be Russian. Maybe there's a scenario when the bodies are so bloodied and the people are so tired that they're just like, fuck it. Okay, I don't want to send anybody else to die. Just draw the line where it is after the Donetsk and Luhansk regions have been fully captured. But if the Russians say in response to that, sure, we're fine with doing that, but Kherson and Zaporizhia, they're still Russian. Because under the Russian constitution, a city of 750,000 people, and a city where the human safari is going on daily, ambulance crews and fire truck crews are constantly targeted. It's really bad over there. Those would be given over to the Russians in their ideal system. And if they don't abandon that, why would the Ukrainians recognize Russian gains if the Russians won't recognize that the land that Ukraine then holds is theirs? Because it just could be, okay, next step. They want to end it. They don't want to just start another chapter.
Right. The concern would be, though, if it militarily gets to the situation where they control Donetsk, like, as I think we both agree on this, that Donetsk is much more defensible, just from both a terrain perspective and like the amount of military investments that's been made in that area. I think, just from, like, I guess this is just my thoughts at this point. The Ukrainians are in major trouble at this point, right? Because they don't have the same kind of defensive capability that they would otherwise have. The land is much harder to defend. There is less of those tank dishes, a lot more open. And so, it might get to the point where, like, let's say it gets to the point where the Russians occupy Donetsk, and now they're just faced with this.
Then they want to keep going,
big open
right?
field.
Go take Dnipro, right? I understand what you're saying.
Keep going, right?
I mean, I understand the concern. Obviously, I have that concern too. It's part of the reason why the Finnish president told Trump. And this was probably like, I felt like I was transported back to 1916. He said, Kramatorsk and Sloviansk is the fortress against the Hun, Mr. Trump. And apparently, Trump actually reacted really positively to that. That's the type of stuff that works on Trump. So maybe we just need to go out there and start talking like an old 1915 British war propaganda channel. Like, the Huns have come again to destroy our good, beautiful buildings. Like, I don't know. I understand what you're saying, but I also don't know where the Russian army is going to be, because one intelligence assessment from the American government says that they could take Kramatorsk and Sloviansk in 2 months. I don't know what crack they were smoking or what type of Lviv sitting that person was doing. It's just not true. Is it possible that they could take it within the next year or so? That's something that's going to be a little bit more debatable. And the question is whether it's going to be a horrible, bloody slog by the time, if they even can get on the other side of it. Could they continue the war? Because they haven't had to fight for a fortress city like Kramatorsk before. They haven't had to fight for a fortress city like Sloviansk before. The Battle of Bakhmut is not the same. I mean, the Battle of Avdiivka is not the same. This is a much larger city, twin cities next to each other, both with over 100,000 people, and it's been built up over a long period of time. And the lead up to the city in those wide open fields, they are making a killing ground. When I was in Konstantinivka with the drone team, near the lake to the south of it. If anybody wants to go look at a map, they can look at the lake to the south of Konstantinivka. That's where I was. Every 5 seconds, they were throwing out an FPV drone. Every second somebody was awake, they were throwing an FPV drone. And they were bleeding out everywhere. It was sad to watch these guys die like that in these tree lines, trying to move from tree line to tree line with these little thermal blankets. And doing that all the way through Kramatorsk at the rate of advance they're doing right now is going to be so painful that I quite frankly can't tell you what the state of the Russian armed force is going to be if we got to that scenario that you're talking about.
If I could respond,
Let's go to Rob. Yeah, we're gonna go to Rob, then Grid, then Tyler.
If
Go
I
ahead.
can respond. So first off, I'll just say I'm enjoying the conversation. It's interesting without Wick interrupting everyone how actually things could be.
Wow, you
brought up,
can't
so
keep
that's
my name
interesting.
out of your mouth,
Secondly,
can you?
please,
See, every
please,
time you
please,
mention me, I'm going to talk
please,
more.
please,
I just want to make you know.
Rob, go ahead. Let Rob go. We'll come back to you.
Proves the point even there. Second, to answer the point that Dylan was saying directly to me. Yes, but it's not just they still could have said, no, we don't accept it, the mineral deal. It's not that they rejected the mineral deal publicly. It's they rejected Trump's plan for an eventual peaceful negotiation. Wick, can you please control yourself?
No.
Please.
Fuck
Just
you.
try to, Wick,
off.
it's not a good look. Please, just control yourself and let me
It's not a
finish
good
my
look
point,
for
and then
you,
you'll
yeah.
have a chance to respond.
If you're
That's
going to
the
mention my name, I am going to respond to you. If you keep my name out of your fucking mouth, then I'll be quiet.
Wick, you
Okay,
don't
no,
impress
okay.
me or
Will
anyone
Smith.
else. Please be quiet and let people talk. If you don't know what you're talking
If you
about,
keep
then
my
sit
name
there
out of your
quietly.
mouth,
Okay,
I can talk
please,
about
I
it,
will
but
be
it's
quiet.
my turn to talk.
Rob, make
That's
your point.
wife's
Make your
name.
point.
we can
Right,
negotiate.
yeah,
my
right.
wig's
Keep my
name
name
Yes.
out of your
out.
mouth.
I don't want to have to be beating people all the time. Right, Rob. To your point. Go to your point.
Some
and then
real
I know
Will
Grid,
Smith
Tyler wanna
energy
get in.
there from Wick.
Oh,
Anyways,
Jesus
so
Christ.
the point is, yes, they didn't just deny the mineral deal publicly. They were willing to sign it. What they did was they besmirched Trump's plan of trying to have peaceful negotiation. Now, it is true, as Wick illustrated.
Wait,
that
are
I
you
did-
talking about the? I'm sorry, I'm just trying to clarify. Are you talking about the mineral deal itself, or are you talking about the sit down meeting that Zelensky?
Correct. The sit down
Okay,
meeting.
so you're talking about the meeting.
Correct.
Okay, I thought you were talking about when Secretary Bessent approached the government and said, accept this now. And
No,
they're
no,
like,
no.
What?
Now,
Okay,
what I'm
okay.
saying is they should have denied it then. But what I'm saying is to, in the background, whatever the circumstances were, seemingly agree with this. And then in public, after meeting with European leaders, sort of disparage the plan that Trump and Vance had was a bad move. And so Wick's correct that I said, where did that get them? And you said it got a new mineral deal, but I'm never suggesting where Wick's incorrect is I never said they should have signed the mineral deal. In fact, I said the opposite. It probably was a bad deal and they should have denied it. It is true that it was sent to them very quick. And there's a lot of pressure because Ukraine, like it or dislike it, we're not talking about oughts, we're talking about they need this support from the United States. So there's a new leader that comes in Donald Trump, and they're sort of walking on eggshells. So you hesitate to be like, no, we don't like what you're offering us here with this mineral deal. So I give them a little credence there on that. But still, the way in which Zelensky did this was bad. Real quick, please, sorry. I promise, I've been trying to get this point out for 20 minutes. The reason that I said, where did that get them was, Wick himself is someone who talked about the lack of sharing of intel led to these damaging results. You'll remember that the meeting, Zelensky, was February 28th. It was a mere 3 days later that the Trump administration suspended military aid, which probably led to increased deaths of Ukrainian soldiers. And then 2 days after that, when they stopped sending the intel, which Wick said was a big deal. So when I say, where did it get Zelensky? It's not just, yes, it got them a better mineral deal. They could have got that mineral deal by having negotiations behind the scenes instead of publicly disparaging Trump. But the public disparaging of Trump, you know where that got Zelensky? In the fucking doghouse. And that probably resulted in more people dying of his people. Of course, I understand that it's hard to get that nuance if you just want to interject and not listen to what someone's saying. That's the point that I was making.
Oh,
Can I
It
that's
was
just quickly
absolutely
respond, like,
not.
20
This
seconds?
just hold on. He said my name like 10 times. Okay. And if he's
okay.
gonna say
We're
my
gonna go.
name
We're gonna
10
let you
times,
respond,
then
Wick,
have
and then
some
we're gonna go to Dylan for
little
20
bit of a
seconds, and then we're gonna go to
response.
Grid, and then Tyler.
Well,
All right,
first of
go
all,
ahead.
Rob is sure. Just real quick. Rob is entirely dishonest. That is not at all what he meant. You can go back into the VOD and you can look at it and you can decide, dear audience, what you think he meant. Where did it get him? He was referring to the deal, not to the intelligence sharing, which he contended with me actually had an effect. He fought on that subject with me. So now for him to try to steal that take and try to use it to kind of prop up his fragile ego, right? After he got proven wrong, 4K, HD, real time, 360 pixels, all that shit, right? Fair enough. But you know what? At the end of the day, when it comes down to it, I'm shamed that we have a president that's ego was so fragile that because Zelensky stood up for his own country, that we shut off intelligence sharing for that reason and got people fucking killed and got them to lose Kursk and lose that advantage that they had at that time. That's shameful. Shameful as an American to think. And that's all I want to say.
All right, Dylan, you got 20 seconds. Then we're going to Grid. Then we're going to Tyler. Go ahead.
Is 360 pixels a lot of pixels?
I don't
Wouldn't that
know.
be a
I'll
few
take the L
pixels?
on that. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
You're taking
Anyway.
a lot of L's tonight, Wick.
It's a weird
You thought you
question.
at least get the
Not from
pixels
you.
right.
I
Okay.
was
Anyway, go ahead.
Look, I agree that the meeting went bad. I think he should have led with the the boxing belt from Usyk. I think that might have played better with Trump. But I do also want to say that what Zelensky did say in that meeting, which ended up being about how do you make them stand by their commitments? How do you make them stand by their ceasefires? That critique ended up being ringing 100% true like a church bell when the civilian ceasefire that the Russians supposedly agreed to, that Trump announced in the middle of the night, proud as all hell that he could deliver on being the peacemaker, immediately got blown up in the version of either a hospital there or a civilian home there, or the fact that the Russians didn't even acknowledge that they agreed it in the first place. And then the energy ceasefire, well, that was violated within hours. And I mean, that was a disaster too. And obviously that's been broken down to a point where now we're seeing it heavily escalate again there. So I agree that the meeting could have gone differently, but I also think that Zelensky had decent points, and those points ended up ringing true.
But just real quick, I'll just say real quick. We could debate that, whether or not Russia's at fault, et cetera, et cetera. I could concede that argument for the sake of this. I'm just saying that those concerns could have been legitimately raised behind the scenes. When you say behind the scenes, yeah, this all sounds good. And then after talking to European leaders that share these same concerns Zelensky did, hey, I'm casting shade on your plan. And to say that publicly and sort of come out and take both Trump and Vance by surprise, that's a fucking bad move. It was a very bad strategy from Zelensky.
Let's go to Grid. Grid, go ahead. And then we're going to go Tyler.
Well, I've really enjoyed relitigating the last 8 months of shit that we've already talked about. Is awesome. And I really wanted to talk about the meetings in Alaska and the reason
let's do that.
because they're important. What's important to me at this point is actually trying to understand what it's going to end up costing Ukraine, because that's where we're at, folks. All the rest of this is just simple bullshit and smoke and mirrors. And what's it going to end up costing Ukraine? They are operating from a point of weakness. As a matter of fact, they are, as Dylan very, very eloquently, by the way, I'm shocked. The way he talks about it is the Ukrainians are.
Did you just slap me?
Oh, but keep going, Grid. Keep going.
A backhanded compliment there.
Oh, welcome
You
to
were
the
so
South.
articulate, Dylan.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I
Grid.
didn't
Finish
know.
up.
I'm sorry. I just didn't know. I'm sorry. But at any rate, yeah, I mean, Dylan did a great job of illustrating exactly why Ukraine is in the position it's in and why it's going to cost them dearly to end this war. I don't care about who did what 6 months ago or a year ago. None of that fucking matters. None of it matters. All that matters is what happened in Alaska, because that's yesterday, and what happens tomorrow when Zelensky wakes up and tries to talk to Putin or not talk to him, or Putin decides to put on his big boy pants and go stomping around. And that's what really matters. And I don't really give a shit about the rest of it. I think that we've wasted a lot of time here tonight. And although I really did enjoy listening to Dylan and to some degree Lactoid. But I think that ultimately the lines in the sand that Putin have drawn, he knows that he doesn't have to give up shit He doesn't have to. He can just sit there and continue to throw bodies at it, and he doesn't care. He does
That's
not.
why
I
we're
mean,
not
and
getting
so
peace. You understand, right? Because we haven't made it costly
do
enough.
you
for them.
understand how to keep your fucking mouth shut?
Do you
You've
understand
not
how to
been
make
able
a
to
good point?
accomplish that all
Do you
night.
understand how to make this an actual
not interrupted
conversation?
you.
Oh,
I have sat here quietly, you dumb.
You
fuck,
should have kept. You
and
should have
been
fucking
really
kept that up.
respectful.
You should have
So
fucking
shut
kept
the
that up. You have
fuck
not
up
been
and let
respectful.
my God.
someone
You have not
talk.
contributed.
all right,
Nobody
all
wants
right.
to
You have
hear your
decided
crap
when I
over
tried
Okay,
to
You
all
challenge
have
right,
you on your
wasted
all right.
point,
an hour
you
and a
tried to
half of my
big boy me,
fucking
but you
time.
gotta
I'm
put
gonna
on your
tell you
big boy
again,
pants.
all right, we're
because
calling
this is
it.
bullshit.
All right, everybody get muted again. I'm gotta get a fucking hotkey. Is what we're about to start doing. I think that's gonna be my next thing. Hotkey to mute everybody. Because Jesus Christ. All right,
I
Tyler,
said
go
that
ahead.
every debate. I never did it, Gibbs. You'll
Bro,
never do it
doing,
either.
I'm doing it Sunday. I've already put it on the list. I hired someone to do it. We're gonna fire him or something. We're gonna get it done. All right, Tyler, you're
I
going.
actually get done.
I was originally
Yeah.
raising my hand to clarify the timeline of what happened with the offer, and then Zelensky agreeing to it, us flying out there, and then him spending the weekend in Germany saying he wasn't going to be blah, blah, blah. But we've moved on since there. I kind of more want to talk about what Green was just talking about, what's going to come from this, what they're going to get up. So, as I was trying to allude to earlier, it's what this mineral deal will entail. The most resource-rich, obviously, areas are held right now by the Russian government. Russia has to cede some ground in order for Ukraine to take possession of those minerals again, in order for the Ukrainian deal to even work in the first place. So that has to be part of this. If Trump's planning on getting those minerals out of this, I just
That's not going to happen.
it might, you might be right, but also the second point that he was making, I heard it brought up in intros as well. It's think of the microcosm for this to be you have a home invader at your house. At what point do you listen to your neighbor when the home invader says just let him take your wife and all your possessions and put down the gun because more people are going to die if you fire back? It's like nobody would do that. The decision to stop fighting is on the Ukrainian government and its people. They're the ones that decide. All we're doing is providing them munitions. So saying that we want more deaths by enabling this to go, all we're doing is allowing them to perform their will. And they're the ones that get to decide when they want to lay down their arms and let some home invader come into their home and take their wife. And
Well,
all their
that's
possessions.
not exactly true. Of course, it should be up to them. And I think it would be a grotesque violation of their sovereignty from the perspective, I mean, the war with Russia aside, from outside parties to say, no, you can no longer fight back. That would be grotesque. However, we are not obligated to continue to finance it. We're certainly not obligated to do that. And I do think that there's some truth that there are people like Lindsey Graham who have publicly announced we're happy that they're fighting and killing Russians over there. That benefits us. So I
am too.
definitely think that it's within grounds to say there are an awful lot of people that are more than happy to see Ukrainian men die if that means bleeding out Russia more, because they say, hey, our people don't have to do it. My sons and daughters don't have to do it. And so I think that my position on this has been the more it's evident, the writing's been on the wall for a long time. That this is going to eventually end with a negotiation, and Ukraine's going to be negotiating from a position of weakness. And so, to me, the most humane thing to do would have been to wind down the effort in supporting them from from a long time ago, and to encourage and say, "Listen, Zelensky, you're going to have terms that aren't exactly the best, but we're going to try our best to negotiate that peaceful deal to get the best possible terms with you. But we got to stop financing this." Kudos to the brave Ukrainian people that have been fighting, but I don't think the United States financing that or Europe financing that is going to be beneficial in the long run, except to allow more Ukrainians to die. And now we're in a similar negotiating position, if not weaker, than they were in 2022, when allegedly there were peace negotiations that were being sabotaged by people like in the UK.
I keep hearing this thing about 2022, but I disagree fundamentally. The situation in 2022, the Ukrainian armed forces compared to now, it's a completely different beast. Not only is it a completely different beast, but the strategic situation is different. Back in 2022, the Ukrainians didn't control Kherson. Back in 2022, that was before the Kharkiv counteroffensive when these negotiations were going on. So there's tons and tons and tons of land that the Ukrainians have since that point when negotiations were going on at the start occurred that liberated a lot of land and put Russia in a worse position. Pushing them over the Dnieper River was absolutely necessary for Ukraine's national security. And now the Russians are still demanding that they control that city. But the Ukrainians said, fuck your demands, I'm taking back the city. And now they're in a much better position than they would have been in April of 2022 when they didn't control Kherson, when they didn't control the territory in Kharkiv, and they weren't the drone machine that they are now. The modern battlefield in Ukraine is is diabolical. It's dystopian. It's dystopian. I think most World War I soldiers would go back to Verdun than rather deal with the idea of the birds can blow up if they ram into you. And there's more drones than there are birds in that area, constantly swarming. But what that does mean is that you need a lot less men to hold a lot more territory. And that has benefited the defender for the last 2 to 3 years disproportionately. And so that gives Ukraine leverage. And that leverage still needs to be backed up with more men that they have to recruit. But this isn't like a fool's errand. Like the Ukrainians can only go down into complete destruction. They have cards that I think we need to talk about. The long-range drone program that the Ukrainians are engaging in is destroying Russian oil refineries at such a rate that the Russians have banned the export of gas in order to stabilize domestic prices after the St. Petersburg Commodity Exchange saw a 30% drop year on year. That's real economic impact that the Ukraine, look it up, Lactoid, it's really interesting shit. I don't know why the West doesn't talk about it, but it's
all in
really,
my document, Lactoid.
yeah, if you want to check it out, it is in his document. I did check his document a little bit beforehand. And so these are tools in Ukraine's tool belt that we need to acknowledge when coming to the table. We don't need to pretend that Ukraine is like Superman and he's going to come save the little Ukrainian child with the flag and he's but we do need to talk about the advantages that they have in order to get a deal that not only respects the power that they have, respects the fact that they are still willing to fight if that is necessary, but also is going to be much more structurally sound. For example, if there's any deal where the Russians demand to cross the river, that's a disaster for Ukraine. That's a disaster for Europe. If there's any deal where they're demanding Ukraine give up its most defensible positions, so if they launch a war in the future, it'll be easier, that's a disaster for Ukraine. That's a disaster for Europe. That's a disaster for us. And so we need to negotiate knowing that there are areas where we can still apply pressure. This isn't just a fool's errand and applying pressure.
Well, no doubt.
I want to go.
agree
Hold
with
on,
you.
hold on. I want to go back to Grid and let Grid finish out his thought because we did cut him off. Grid, go ahead and finish
I'd
out
like to
your thought
respond
here.
to Tyler after that, if possible. To something
Yeah,
he said
okay.
earlier.
We'll go
Go
to.
ahead. Go ahead. I can wait. I'm fine.
Well, no, you go ahead and finish it out if you want because you were interrupted. Go ahead.
I would like to respond
Yeah,
to
no,
Dylan at some point.
Yeah,
too.
I mean, I can. Yeah, I can finish. So basically, I just think that at this point, and obviously things can change. I will grant that anything can change. War is a very fluid environment. However, at this point, and for a while now, Ukraine is in the weaker position, and Russia's going to hold what they want. Now, I anticipate Trump and other world leaders being able to influence Putin to some degree to see reason or whatever you want to call it, so that and give concessions. And I don't disagree with Dylan that for Ukraine to say, "Okay, I'm okay with this deal," it's going to be to some degree on their terms, right? Like they're not going to want to give up X amount of land, but they are probably at this point. We know that they're willing to give up some ground, and now it's a question of making the deal happen, so that everybody can live with it. And I think that that's what we should have been talking about for the last 2 hours instead of 2022 and whatnot. But I appreciate the conversation; it's been great.
Let's go to Rob, then to Lactoid. Go ahead.
Okay,
Rob.
real quick, I just want to say about 10:25, I have to leave if that's cool with everyone. No
that's
disrespect,
fine.
I just had a prior obligation, so I just want to let people know that.
No worries.
Dylan, I have a question for you, real quick. I could be completely wrong about this. I admit that I'm not as informed about territorial gains and things like that. I get that you're saying that there are unique territorial gains that have occurred since 2022 that you think are very important. But when it comes to the totality of the territory in Ukraine that Russia controls, is that number higher now than it was in April 2022?
No.
It's roughly the same is my reading of it. Is that true?
No, it's lower because they took back Kherson and the Kharkiv counteroffensive. So they have more territory now than they did in April of 2022. Yes.
They have more now.
Yeah,
Ukraine
there's a
does.
popular look. I don't blame you, Rob. This is a popular misconception, but they took back more territory in such a way that even with all of Russia's gains, it's still not enough to wipe out what they took.
Okay,
That they
I
still
just want to
took
be
more
clear.
back.
So when you're saying Ukraine has more territory now than they did in 2022, correct?
In April of 2022, they have more territory
Okay.
now. 100%, yes.
My understanding, though, is that it's about even. I could be wrong, and that's fair enough. But it's the point I'm trying to make is in April of 2022, there were far less dead Ukrainians. And what was unique about April was I think that they shocked Russia in March. I think that there was this initial advance by Russia, and Ukraine shocked them with the advances that they had from March to April. Because I think, if correct me if I'm wrong, the high point of territory that Russia controlled was in March of 2022, I believe. Unless I'm
Yes, March was the high point. Yes.
and so I think that that's what made that a unique negotiating position. That I think Russia was shocked a little and was like, oh shit, this isn't going to be a walk in the park. These people could actually fight. And it's going to have to be, if we are to have success, it's going to be long and drawn out, and it's going to cost us financially, and it's going to cost us manpower. And so to me, even if there have been slight incremental gains and strategic gains that are very important in your essence, talking about the actual areas that have been taken back from Ukraine from 2022 to now in 2025, I think that the deaths of the Ukrainians plus the initial shock that Russia had means that they are negotiating from a weaker position now than they would have been if they negotiated in April of 2022.
I disagree. I'll try not to drag this out because I know other people want to talk. I disagree for a few reasons. The first reason I would put forward is that if they are negotiating from a weaker position, we have to acknowledge that the Russians did not change their offers too much, irrespective of, oh well, now the Ukrainians are doing much better in April. It wasn't like, hey, you no longer need to demilitarize. That's not a demand of ours. They kept those demands on the table, as far as I'm aware, unless anybody else wants to throw a fact at me I didn't know, which would be surprised to learn. And so as long as those demands, which were never going to be concedable, were on the table, the Ukrainians were put in a situation which was pretty lose-lose. Either continue with this fight and hope for the best in defense of your country, or concede, demilitarize, give in to these concessions, legitimize what you think is an illegal attack on your country, with no guarantee that they won't invade again, because the very security guarantees you need to stop a future invasion are the very demands that Russia are making of you on top of your demilitarization. So them having more territory now and a much more advanced drone force that can hold much more land with much fewer men are both two things that I think give them significant leverage, especially since now they can hit Russia everywhere inside Russia with their long-range drone program. They couldn't do that in 2022.
I just think that it wasn't, I don't know that it's as rosy a picture you're saying. I understand other people want to talk, but man, the amount of Ukrainians that have died in this years from April 2022 to now, I don't know if it's worth the small advantages they get, particularly if they end up negotiating a deal that would have been quite similar to what they could have gotten in 2022.
All right, Lactwood, go ahead.
So yeah, I guess I'll respond to Tyler, and then I guess some stuff that Dylan said. I mean, once again, I think there's just a disagreement here as to what the actual reason why the Ukrainians turned down the negotiations in late March and early April of 2022. Again, from the president of Turkey and U.S. officials, it seems like that they were willing to concede the demilitarization point. But one of the sticking points was, concession, like kind of formal concession of Crimea. As well as the fact that they were taking back land, and they were. It's true that in terms of, if you just look at where the Russians were in late March, they had the most, right? Because that's when they were hadn't yet fully pulled out from the Kiev offensive, and then same thing with the northern part of Kherson across the river. But they pulled back a lot, and in April of 2022, I think it is pretty similar, if I'm not mistaken, to the total percentage of land they hold now. But I think just looking at percentage isn't super helpful, because you also have to factor in, like, it's not just like hey, I've got a tank here. It's also, what land have you consolidated, right? What land have you like heavily mined? Do you have trenches in now? Are you able to actually control it? And that's the reason why, for example, the Ukrainian offensive in Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, when they're coming down trying to take those areas, why it failed so dramatically was because the Russians had put up a defense, a relatively strong defense. And then in terms of just analyzing the position there, another point in the position that they weren't in then that they are now, and also kind of going to your point, Tyler, when you're saying, well, it's up to them, right, if they want to keep fighting. This is a point that I think needs some nuance, right? 3/4 of their military are conscripts. And the enthusiasm for the war is entirely flipped. In 2022, it was like over 70%. Yeah, we're going to fight till we win. And a little bit over 20% were saying no. And now it's totally the other way around, where, 70% or more of Ukrainians are saying, let's negotiate an end to this war as quickly as possible. And I think a big reason for that is, not only the mass disruption of life, but the fact that 3/4 of their military is conscripts. I know it's anecdotal, but given that their military is such a high percentage conscript, it would appear to track that the current Ukrainian policy is grabbing people off the streets and taking them to the front lines, which is obviously going to become unpopular with people. And then the other problem is when you say, well, it's up to them. I have some concerns when you say it's up to the people. Well, it's not really. It's currently up to the government because they're not having elections. So if it gets to the point where they don't agree with what Zelensky is doing, which could be the case, we don't know. It might not be, but if it does get to that point, for sure. How are they even going to effectuate change at that point, short of a revolt?
To address that, the government is the voice of the people and the last representative
in a democracy.
Yeah, and they currently suspended elections because of wartime issues, and that's the same reason they implemented their draft. So the government that was chosen to be the wartime government was the Zelensky government.
It was before the war.
The opinion poll says that people's opinions have changed on it. They still picked him to be the leader through this event, and they have to trust the decisions the government's making.
But just real quick, and maybe Dylan will disagree.
It was before the war that he was elected, firstly, and they only elected him for a 5-year term, and he's currently on the 6th year. So I don't know how much you can really.
I know Dylan's going to push back. Dylan, can I say this one point real quick, just to buttress what Lactoid's saying? If he is correct that 3/4 of their military's conscripts, and Dylan may disagree with that, but that would seem to sort of supersede your argument that this was a wartime president. If they're literally forcing conscripts to go to the front line, then it would seem the will of the people is we don't really want to go to the front line.
Well, you could say that about the Second World War as well. This is the war is kind of like you're playing dice, yeah. Whether you go to the front or you're gonna get conscripted. You might not agree that you want to go and die, but you might agree that you're willing to put your name in a hat of other people who might die once you go to the front line. You might agree that we have to fight a war, but you might not want to be the one who goes fights the war. And Rob, I'm meeting tons of people online that there's a lot of people like that. Yep. So, but you might agree that you're willing to put your name in the hat to potentially go, but you don't really want to go. And that seems to be what from the polling indicates that I've seen of the conversations I have for people where most people are, where they're like, I see the problems in the armed forces. I hear about this abuse or that abuse or this corruption scandal or that corruption scandal, or, I see what the Russian war machine is. So I don't want to go. But I'm willing to, go if I'm called upon. And that's why most people who are called upon, they go. And while there are instances of videos that come up of people getting grabbed off the street, the way that it usually works is that those are somebody who has already been called upon and are dodging the draft and have been found and are now being grabbed and brought back. Most people don't like how the conscription system works, but most people acknowledge that they're going to need some version of a system, and it's not like they can just abolish it overnight and start from scratch under these circumstances. I would also like to put forward that it is true that some might see the conscription army as a disadvantage. There are advantages of a conscription army. For example, you don't need to pay a conscript all that much. The Russians, by having to do these gigantic military contract in the middle of Timbuktu shitville, offering somebody $6,000 or $5,000 a month, good pay here. Much better pay than our soldiers in the United States Army are getting in order to go join, to get a 63-year-old man to go join the Russian armed forces and go storm trenches. That's not a sustainable model. That's much more expensive, and you're not exactly inspiring patriots to come to the cause. You're inspiring like old debtors to come to the cause. And that's why the vast majority of Russian volunteers now are between the ages of 45 and 65.
Now, I'll just say this.
You could just take them off the streets.
I don't know about the the pros and cons of conscription, right?
It's one thing.
But it's a war. Well, we could say pros
and cons.
conscription.
Well, that's
the slavery is we don't have to pay them, guys.
If we were invaded by the United States, well, let me just take my position in to make clear. If we were invaded by China tomorrow, I would be in favor of conscription.
Yes. No, I agree with you. But I think that the question becomes, does a government have a responsibility to protect its people? And if the only way you can keep your people from being slaughtered is to have conscription, should you do that? And I think the answer, at least in this case, is yes, right? Yes. If the only way you're going to keep Russians from coming in, killing your women, stealing your children, taking your land, is by having a conscription, I think that the government who I think we all agree a government has a responsibility to its people, I think that's the move, right? This idea that there's been so much death on the Ukrainian side and the Russian side, to be clear, and that wouldn't it be better if we had just avoided all that death by making peace in 2022, I think ignores the idea that, again, Putin was never going to make peace in 2022. He put unreasonable demands, right, that he never expected them to accept because he never wanted actual peace. He wants Ukraine. He wants all of Ukraine. And the only reason that he's willing to stop at a certain point is because we're stopping him. Like this idea that is inevitable that Ukraine will lose, I reject that idea. I don't think it is. I think that we can, if we wanted to, right, support Ukraine in such a way that we could at least keep the status quo as of today. I think that's absolutely more than possible, and I think it's just odd how a bunch of people. I think Dylan's the only one who's been to a war zone here, right? Are so
I went to
certain
Chicago. a couple
about
times.
the state of war that they do not
Kind of
have
war zone.
access to the intelligence that would allow them to make these very strong statements. Like I don't
called
know.
reading.
That's here's the thing.
Quick.
I don't know. I don't know if they can win or not. I don't know if Ukraine. I just don't have the access to the information. Right.
If,
let's
if
go
I
to-
may, if I
reports
if
from-
I
Let's
could,
go to
if I
Rob.
can
Yeah,
finish,
Rob, we're gonna
we
yeah,
have,
go ahead.
yeah,
finish it,
but
we're gonna
if
go.
I can finish, we have reports from the CENTCOM commanders and others who say that the Ukrainians aren't in such a bad position.
okay. First, let me say
Yeah,
again,
we'll
it's,
go to closings here. As well.
thank
Go
you
ahead.
to the other 5 of us for allowing Wick to get through a comment unfettered, unlike he's
Well,
wanted
you
to do when it
tried to
comes the
interrupt
rest
me,
of
but
us.
I'm just too alpha.
There we go. I knew I could trigger him again.
Yeah, because
Secondly,
you
like
kept
it's
saying my
ironic.
name, and I told
It's
you what would
ironic.
happen.
It's ironic that he talks about people on the war zone and trusting them and not having strong opinions when he literally tried to disagree with Dylan when he was like, I've talked to people on the ground that are saying intel's not the reason for the recent losses. So why didn't you take your own advice and listen to the guy that's on the ground? I think that it's not that simple though, again, and I think that if nothing else, I know me and Dylan have massive disagreements on this. I hope that you still believe every time I've talked to you on this, I do massively respect the fact that you went over there. And I definitely don't want to see any of the people you've made friends with and respect die, which is why I'm encouraging for a peaceful resolution. So I do think, though, that I don't subscribe to this. If I haven't been to the war zone, I can't have an opinion. It certainly helps get a different perspective from being there. And that's why I've always sought out Dylan's opinion on this, because I think that he is a source of information. And I understand he has a bias, but so is every other outlet. And I trust that Dylan's bias is understandable to me, and he's wearing it on his sleeve. And that doesn't mean that the information he's providing to us is inaccurate. That's why I asked him, like, do you agree with the land numbers, etc. So I value at least the information he's going, even if I don't just trust it on face value, like I wouldn't if it's coming from anywhere else. But we can still have opinions on that. The only other thing I'll say on this is, look, the idea of conscription, it's actually a complicated question. You may want to ask yourself if we cannot defend our country else through the point of a gun and forcing people into basically slavery, if it was worth defending in the first place. It's a serious, legitimate moral question that one could raise when it comes to the issue of conscription. However, what I will say is, even if you say that an individual country has the right to make that decision, as an outside country, I don't have to fund it. And I think that it's absurd that the United States is funding a military that is relying so heavily. I actually wanted to ask Dylan, do you agree with Lactoid's number that the Army at this point is 3/4 conscription? And if that's the case, I think that's even another clear sign that the United States should not be funding this. We should be doing everything we can, even if that means that the
Was
people
that
of
a
Ukraine
question
don't like
or
the
was
Yes, it was.
that
It was a question. I was
rhetorical?
just finishing my point there, but yeah, sure.
Okay, got you. No, it's probably accurate. It's about 3/4. I mean, the units that I'm with, a lot of them are like, I hang out a lot with the prisoner soldiers. So these are guys in the prison system who have decided, better to have a rifle and fight the Russians at this point, either due to personal patriotic reasons. Some of them are patriots, as much as people would not believe it, or in many other instances because they don't want to be in prison anymore and it's a way out. And some people just want to do something. You're caged up all day, and like being out in the wide fields for some of them is still better. But most of the people are now conscripts. Now, I understand the reason people have problems with the conscript armies, but I also think that under certain circumstances, basically everybody in here would probably agree with the conscript army if put in that position. Once you're divided by two gigantic oceans, as the United States is, with one of the most powerful armed forces in the world, no, the most powerful armed force in the world, with allies both above and below us, it's very easy for us to say, hey, let's not rely on conscription, even though we have for wars where we've invaded other places in the past. But in Ukraine's case, their neighbor is their main problem. They're gigantic in comparison to them. Well, they're gigantic in comparison to anybody with all their time zones, right? Russia's gigantic. And the amount of force that they could bring down could really only over a long period of time be resisted through conscription. And this is going to be true for a lot of smaller states. And so I would put forward the idea that as long as the majority of the public are okay with their name being put in the pot and them signing up for the historical roll of the dice, as all soldiers do when they go to the front, or people are as they are going through the conscription system, then I'm not necessarily opposed to it. I know a lot of men that'll go to the front line and fight, not a lot of men who will go to the front line and put a gun in their mouth if that's what they know the outcome is. So as long as they agree to this contract with their government, then I see no problem in it, especially in circumstances of national survival like this, where occupation is not an option.
Gibbs, can I sign
Yeah,
out here?
Yeah, go ahead and sign out. We're all going to do closures, so you go ahead and start us off. Here.
Yeah, I am so sorry. I hate to do this. You know what happened? I misread the time. I thought we started at 7:30 because I'm an idiot and I'm so self-centered and narcissistic. I assume every time zone is Eastern time. Poor Dylan, who knows where he's at in the world right now, the time differences. But yeah, so my closing thoughts on this is, I thought it was an interesting conversation. I do think that it was important to go back and see how we got in this position and whether or not a negotiation was possible in 2022 and what the terms could have been and how things have changed, because I think it sets the stage forward for what we could expect and what Ukraine might expect and what Russia may expect in any potential peaceful resolution. I can't sit here and talk with any degree of confidence that there's going to be an immediate ceasefire or an immediate deal set forth that will have terms that are favorable to Ukraine better than I thought or more favorable to Russia than I thought. However, I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we will see these, and some of the doom and gloom predictions that trust us, Russia would never sign any deal, it's just not possible, or the terms that they would find necessary, Ukraine will refuse to accept any deal based on those terms. I'm hoping that there's some way to work around this. I've given some of the rationale for what I think those may be. Maybe different peacekeeping type forces. Maybe it turns out that Russia is not as interested in some of those things as people would suggest. Or maybe we could see through economic incentives and sort of the West opening up towards Russia that they would be more willing to then treat favorable a deal with Ukraine that would have sort of a DMZ type issue there. I don't know, but I am optimistic that hopefully those things could occur. We'll see. I think that Trump was very good to sit down, and I think that it was shameful how many people in the West were cheering for Trump to fail with this and saying that he shouldn't even talk to Putin. And I'm actually glad to hear people like Dylan saying, like, look, I'm in favor of that. I'm in favor of them at least trying to get people in the room and Zelensky and Putin getting in the room. So I was happy to hear that. As far as the drama of the stream goes, I mean, Wick, stick to moderating poorly because you're even more poor as a debater. So, like,
You haven't taken a W once against me.
I know you can't even
You
be
keep,
quiet.
I keep telling
even-
you, and I'll
can't
tell you
even-
every time if you use my name, I will respond to you.
Okay, Will Smith, thank you very much. But I think that at the least you
understand
could
he
be
slapped the
quiet.
shit out of the guy who was
You're a
talking to you,
moderator.
right?
Don't you know that you're supposed to be quiet during closing statements? What would you do in one of your panels if someone started talking closing statements
If
because someone used
if
their
they were
name?
talking shit,
Yeah,
I would
that's
let
what-
the other person respond.
No, you wouldn't. That's a lie. Not
Of
during
course I
closing
would.
statements. No, you wouldn't. You wouldn't leave
Yes,
them
I would.
interrupt in closing statements. You're full of
All right,
shit.
please.
Anyways,
please,
to finish
please.
the point, it's
You let
always
people
fun
talk
to
during
embarrass
my
Smith.
closing
Even when the person
I know Rob's just wrong again. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He makes
even-
shit up.
even
All right,
when the
let him
person
finish. Let him finish. So we
even
can
when
get
the
going. Go
person
ahead.
seemingly on his side like Dylan, it's fun to see him being embarrassed, even when Dylan's not trying to do it. So, for that, I say kudos to you, Dylan, for being over there. I thought it was a sensible discussion, even if we would disagree on ultimate conclusions, and appreciated everyone's input into here, and was happy to be part of the panel. So, thanks so much, everyone. I really appreciate it.
All right, fantastic. Thank you for coming. All right,
Yeah,
we're gonna go
embarrassing
ahead.
closing statement. Well, can I go next?
Yes, you can. You
Thank you.
absolutely can.
Excellent. Great. So, to the serious portion of the panel, I do think it's a shame where we're at. I don't know if Ukraine will win. I don't know what the future will hold. I don't think Putin wants peace. I don't think I'm going to make a prediction. I think predictions are important to make so that we can hold, okay, what you said, we can look at it in the future and see if you're correct or not. I don't see peace coming, at least in the next year. I don't think that either side will be willing to come to the table and do what it's necessary to appease the other. I think that it's foolish to think that Putin will stop. I think that any deal he does sign will simply be uh, a prelude to another invasion 5 years, 10 years down the road, however much it takes. He has no intention of letting any Ukraine be independent from Russia. That's not what he wants. That's never what he's wanted. And he's always going to try to take more and more and more. And Putin will not stop. He must be stopped. That said, I hope I'm wrong on this. I hope that I am incorrect. I hope that there is some sort of lasting peace that lets Ukraine retain its independence and sovereignty, right? I think that would be the best and ideal outcome, and I hope that I'm wrong when it comes to that. As to the drama of the panel, it is kind of embarrassing for Rob, and I understand. He takes L's all the time. I get it. It's his thing. He comes on to be the lolcow, the punching bag, right? And that's fun. And no hard feelings, though. I do like you as a person, right? I just think you're just wrong all the time, and that's funny. But I will say this. Tomorrow, I am going to be doing 2 shows, 6 p.m. Eastern. I'll be arguing with Soypill and co., who say that my rhetoric is incel adjacent, I guess. So we're going to talk about that. And then at 11 p.m. Eastern, Andrew Wilson has challenged me, right? Not to a boxing match, which he ran away from, but to a debate on Christian nationalism. And so that shall be fun. So tune in for that at 11 p.m. Eastern. It's a little later than I normally do, but I'm very eager to give him yet another L, right? He's I'm 3-0 against Andrew Wilson. We're going to go for a 4th. But hey, thanks for inviting me, Gibbs. Have a great day.
See you guys.
Thanks for coming. All right.
All right. Super chats. I wanted to stick around and give Wick a chance to get his shots in with me. Poor as usual. Who would have thought? Man, he sucks, doesn't he? Like, Dylan's at least making cogent thoughts. Even people that are on that side of the debate would be like, what the fuck is Wick add to this panel? Nothing. He adds nothing. He just interrupts anytime someone makes a point that he thinks he can get a jab in. And he fucking, like, he's just facially wrong over and over. He's wrong about what he's claiming I said. He's just pulling things out of his ass like, oh, yeah, the intel led to all of the intel stopped being shared, led to all these advances. It's like, okay, well, the person you're agreeing with, Dylan's like, actually, I disagree with that point. And I'm just like, oh, can we see your source on that? Because he seems to be disagreeing. And he's just like, well, yeah, I just disagree. And okay, we'll say fine that I was wrong just in the, this one region. And then later he brings it up. He's like, Dylan agreed with me. No, he didn't, dude. And then when I asked Dylan, Dylan's like, yeah, I disagreed with them. Well, that's because blah, blah, blah. But what you said, it's just like, dude, stop your fucking spurging out. Like, it's clear that you're the problem here, and it's fine to spurg out and shit if you're funny. You're not. You're just a nuisance who's interrupting too much, and you're not making any points. You add nothing. Every single second that he spoke on his side would have been better spent giving it to Dylan, who could have made his arguments far more truthfully and articulately than fucking Wick was making. He just is not good at it. He's not good at debate. He's not. And he tries to compensate through this like aggro tough guy persona who I don't know about you guys, but I ain't fucking buying it. You buying Wick the tough guy? And it's easy to be so flippant in general about conscription when it's not you being conscripted. I don't know. I find that conversation to be a little bit flippant. And I didn't know. I'll be straight up with you. And I'm admitting when I don't know. Like, I didn't know that roughly 3/4 of the army at this point is conscripted. That's much higher than I assumed, which is fucking terrible. And it further illustrates my point that we should stop funding that shit immediately because it will provide an incentive for Ukraine to have to accept shittier terms. If Ukraine, or more accurately, the government of Ukraine in the form of Zelensky, feels that they're going to continue to get the backing of the West and the United States, then they'll keep sending their people to the meat grinder. And I would like to see that stop. Nonetheless, the debate's over. Let's get to some super chats. Thank you so much, all of you, for your support. It is absolutely tremendous. I know that this wasn't the most exciting panel in the world. You could still get super chats in here now if you like. I promise we'll get to them. You've listened to me debate for nigh on 2 hours and 20 minutes. So if you appreciated it, please send the super chats in. But then I'm going to head out and go play some Dungeons and Dragons poorly I'll be like the Wick of our D&D team. I'll admit, I fucking suck at Dungeons and Dragons. Whoopee! Anyways, let's see. Where were we? Prime, thank you so much. Muscle says, member for 5 months. Thank you. Amagat, $5 says, at least Wick seems to be the only one on the panel with severe TDS. True? Because Racecar, $5, who's waiting for me patiently over on the other channel to get playing some D&D, says, Rob loses debate points tonight for not wearing the Phil Kessel shirt from last week. The old hot dog shirt that everybody shit on. Only a Mr. Bill, $2 says, I suggest extra thank Excedrin for this headache. Taylor Cook, $20. Thank you so much. Says, the Donbass becomes a buffer state with a DMZ and Russia gets Crimea. Ukraine has paid reparations and a pile of long-range cruise missiles as a security blanket and a no-fly zone declared. The U.S. gets minerals to recover expenses. I don't know that Russia would accept that deal, and they're negotiating from a position of strength. Dean Jacobs, $8 says, hey, Dean, thanks so much as always. Because Racecar, $5 says, in my best Ferris Bueller's Day Off impression, Boober. I know I can't do it either. Ben Stein there. Mr. Ubercross, $10 says, Wick is insufferable. I honestly would love to debate a number of issues with him, yet his mic's so loud and Dylan's so decent. I disagree with the dude, but he's reasonable. I enjoy Dylan. Yeah, notice that even when Grid was yelling at Wick seemed to be the commonality, the common link. The rest of us were allowing the other side to finish. Wick, I don't know. I don't have to relitigate. You saw it. Bandit848, $2 says, I'm glad I missed Wick to watch Death Wish. Sorry, Rob, it's fair. Todd Sullivan, $5 for a super sticker. Thanks so much, Todd. And Mr. Ubercross says, if you enjoy the debate content, you have to super chat so he knows you have something to enjoy. Adam Smith, level econ here. Thank you so much, Mr. Ubercross. Really appreciate it. So I'll stick with you for a couple seconds here. And then we're going to be raiding over to my good friend EOD. That's what we're going to do for a little Dungeons and Dragons. Now, I will also be streaming on my game show, but you can go to EOD's channel and be able to donate monies that will affect the game. I recommend you throw a bunch of shitty curse box at us, and so that it increases the chance of silly or negative shit happening to us. But the instructions on how to donate those sorts of monies will be on the channel. So consider doing that. We'll take some last minute donations if you please. It'd be nice to get to 50% of our goal. I mean, only 43%, pretty weak. Now, let's be honest. You also saw that after Wick started being a little shit, that I knew that was the only entertaining part of the debate for the majority of my audience. So I was poking it, right? I was taking the fire poker and trying to give a little red meat to my audience. So I hope you all appreciated that. I hope you did. I thought that I tried to give the audience a little what they wanted, and I hope that you did enjoy the debate. Yeah, I mean, well, you're wrong. You're wrong. Like, I'm actually bringing up factual points, and I didn't start off being a dick to Wick. I was just like, where are you getting this information? Dylan disagrees with you. Maybe Dylan's wrong. Happy to hear where you've got this information. So yeah, I'm glad that people are amused, and I'm glad you appreciate it. Any last minute donations? We need what? $72 to bring us to 50% of our goal. Anyone? Bueller? Anyone out there? Is it better to financially donate on YouTube or Rumble? It's interesting. On YouTube, I could click, bring up your message, see them. On Rumble, it's more difficult for me to do that. Rumble, I probably keep a higher percentage of what you donate. However, it doesn't help me on the algorithm on YouTube, which is the primary place that I watch. So in that sense, it could help me to donate to YouTube. You could also donate through PayPal at robnoerr, even when I'm not streaming. buymeacoffee.com/robnoerr or on Cash App at $robnoerr. We're close. We're only $72 away from 50% of our goal. Anyone? Well, while you people decide on that, I'm going to set up the raid to EOD. Then I got to go over there and apologize to all of them for being late. Mwah. Where you at, EOD? I don't even see you. Oh, there we go. All right. So we'll be raiding over there. Look, I'm trying to keep it separate, the D&D and gaming content separate from this political channel. So I hope that that's appreciated by people. You could also go over to my gaming channel if you want, and I'll be streaming there tonight. But you'd be better ahead to just go to EOD's channel if I'm totally honest. The gaming channel, if you're interested, is just Normal America Gaming. I'll put the link right now. I'm patiently waiting for $72 to be donated, so we're at 50% of our goal. I know someone's going to do it. Special thanks to everyone that donated, especially Unforced Ego, who basically had us at our goal even before we started the debate, donating an insane $300 as we started out. So thank you so much for that. Consider going over to Normal America Gaming, giving a sub. We're about to raid into EOD. If Dungeons & Dragon isn't your appeal, you can go over Andrew Wilson streaming right now, so you can check that out over in the Crucible, and then I'm sure he'll raid someone. So thank you so much, Bandit. Says EOD is dyeing his hair again for $2. Oh, shit. EOD, what are you doing? So, all right. I'm going to play my little outro song. Someone's about to donate $70. It's going to get us to $500 for the stream. Thank you to my mods. Thank you to everyone that donated. Thank you to everyone who liked the stream, that chatted, or that just watched silently. I appreciate you all. Thank you so much. And I guess to the people in the panel, a little pissed off that I was allowed to be filibustered over there by Wick and not allowed to respond for like 20 minutes. But oh well, bygones are bygones. So thanks everyone over there. Really appreciate you all. Enjoy the raid of EOD and the D&D stuff. Or if not, head over to Andrew Wilson's channel. Get that $70 in during my outro. As always, Ron Quay, $2 as we definitely didn't hit the goal twice. Donate now, see? Now we only need $68. Thank you so much, everyone. Get that $68 in. As always, have a good one.